Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleep Science. Tonight your eyes drift upward, and the sky feels like it's holding its breath. Somewhere out there, a pinprick of light is cutting through the void at ridiculous speed. A frozen relic from beyond our solar system. An object scientists tagged with the almost bureaucratic name 3i Atlas. You can picture it now, glowing faintly in the black as if it knows you're watching. Maybe it doesn't care. Maybe it's carrying secrets older than the Earth itself. You, on the other hand, are just trying to wind down before bed, which is a little ironic. Because staring into the infinite isn't usually a recipe for relaxation. But don't worry, you probably won't survive long enough to worry about being flattened by it anyway. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm genuinely curious to know who's staring into the abyss with me at 2 a.m. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is how tiny it looks, barely brighter than the dimmest stars if you even manage to spot it at all. But the numbers behind that faint smudge are outrageous. 3i Atlas is not from here, it's interstellar. That 3i tag literally means third interstellar object humans have identified cruising through our neighbourhood. The I is for interstellar, which sounds cooler than not one of ours. And the 3 means it follows Oumuamua and Borisov, two earlier cosmic tourists who already had their turn in the spotlight. By the time you're even hearing about it, Atlas has been tumbling along for who knows how many millions of years, wandering from one star's gravitational pull to another, like some cosmic hitchhiker with no schedule and no return ticket. You let that sink in for a moment. A rock-ice chemical cocktail created in a completely different solar system is now swinging by Earth. It's like meeting someone at the grocery store who grew up on a planet you'll never visit, holding a shopping list written in a language you can't pronounce. The thought is both thrilling and a little creepy. Astronomers gave it the Atlas part of its name because it was spotted by the Atlas Survey in Hawaii, one of those robotic telescopes designed not to admire the stars but to panic quietly whenever something new or possibly dangerous drifts into view. You can picture the setup, a serene island night, palm trees swaying, crickets chirping, and meanwhile a dome of machinery is sweeping the skies like a cosmic nightlight for humanity. Computer pings, some astronomer sips lukewarm coffee, and suddenly history shifts. Of course, history is a strong word when most people shrug at comets unless they're Instagram-worthy. But that's part of the fun. You're tuned in because you like to think about the stuff everyone else scrolls past. The idea of an interstellar visitor is already rare enough. The last one, Oumuamua, stirred chaos ears because it didn't act like a comet, didn't look like an asteroid, and at one point was accused of being an alien probe. Historians still argue whether Oumuamua was a natural shard of rock or some kind of failed alien solar sail. If you're keeping track, yes, this means your species is so desperate for cosmic company that even space debris gets accused of sending text messages home. 3i Atlas, though, plays its role a little more traditionally. It has a visible coma, that hazy halo of gas and dust that gives comets their ghostly vibe. In photos, it looks like someone spilled powdered sugar across a patch of sky and then sneezed on it. That alone sets it apart from Oumuamua, which never produced the classic comet hair. Still, the alien question lingers in the back of your mind because once you've accused one visitor of being an alien artifact, every future rock has to endure the same rumour mill. And let's be honest, the internet doesn't help. You can practically hear the forums typing. By the time Atlas made headlines, threads were already asking if it carried microbes or secret messages, or doom. People adore the idea that space has personal beef with Earth. Meanwhile, astronomers are just happy it exists at all. Another chance to grab data, another glimpse of the materials floating between the stars. Speaking of which, let's talk Seoul scale. You've seen maps where Earth looks huge and imposing, but in cosmic terms, our planet is the size of a lint ball under the couch. 3i Atlas is estimated to be maybe a kilometre wide, tiny compared to moons and planets, but if it smacked into Earth, well, you wouldn't have to worry about setting your alarm tomorrow. Don't stress though, its trajectory misses us by a comfortable margin. Comfortable meaning millions of kilometres, which is like saying the car swerved by safely because it only passed within 4 lanes and a guardrail. Close enough to notice, far enough to breathe. It's not just the distance that impresses you. It's the speed. Atlas barrels through the solar system at something like 0 kilometers per second. That's fast enough to circle Earth in under 7 minutes. Imagine your morning commute at that pace. You'd spill your coffee before you even left the driveway. And yet, against the black backdrop of space, it looks almost still. That's one of those cosmic jokes. The faster something moves, the calmer it appears when you're watching from 100 million kilometers away. Now, if you lean back, you can almost imagine what it would be like to stand on its surface. Not that you'd actually stand. The gravity is practically non-existent, so you'd float like a confused balloon tied to a rock. You'd see the sun as a distant beacon, stars fixed in every direction, and dust curling off into infinity. If comets could dream, maybe that's what it feels like, a never-ending drift, punctuated by brief hot flashes whenever they pass near a star. Here's a historical aside for you. In 1066, the famous Bayeux tapestry stitched a comet into the sky over Harold's doomed battle at Hastings. Historians still argue whether people thought it was an omen or just a weird sky firework, but either way it made the cut into embroidered history. You imagine future humans embroidering 3i Atlas into a digital quilt. Pixel art glowing on some Martian museum wall. The difference is, medieval peasants didn't know what they were looking at. You, meanwhile, get to whisper smugly that it came from another star. Of course, if you tell your friends this at brunch, you'll probably get blank stares. That's the trouble with cosmic wonders. They don't fit neatly into small talk. People want to know who's dating who, not who's streaking through interstellar space. Maybe you could rebrand it. Call it the Celebrity Comet. Put sunglasses on it in memes. Someone will eventually make an astrology TikTok claiming it affects your mood swings, guaranteed. Still, even if it never becomes viral, it does something important. It makes you look up. You live in a time when light pollution drowns out most stars, when screens steal attention, when the night sky feels like background wallpaper instead of a stage. And then, bam! A comet drifts by that literally doesn't belong here. Suddenly you remember that the universe is larger than the last notification you checked. That's a gift, in its own weird way. There's another quirky tidbit for you. Comets often carry organic molecules, the kind that, in theory, could help seed life. That doesn't mean 3i Atlas is dropping off space bacteria like an Amazon delivery, but it does mean that if you squint hard enough, you could imagine your very distant ancestors hitchhiking here inside an icy rock. Historians still argue whether life on Earth began locally or with cosmic deliveries, but the debate adds a dreamy flavour to the idea. As you exhale into the dark, you wonder if some fragment of 3i Atlas is destined to crash gently, sprinkling molecules into our atmosphere like stardust sprinkles. The best part is how you'll never get closure. This object is on a one-way trip, sliding past and then gone forever. No reruns, no curtain call. It reminds you how fragile observation really is. You catch a glimpse, scribble some data, and the universe carries on. There's comfort in that, oddly. Whatever drama swirls down here on Earth, politics, deadlines, TikTok feuds, the comet doesn't care, it glides past, indifferent. Maybe that's what humanity needs to remember more often, that the cosmos doesn't schedule around us. And yet, here you are, lying in bed, listening to a stranger's voice tell you about it. You've made space in your evening for something utterly impractical but profoundly human. Or you're still floating in that mental image of a lonely rock, but now your thoughts drift further back, way beyond the moment of discovery, beyond even the comet's swing through our solar system. You start asking, where did 3i Atlas actually come from? What nursery birthed this wanderer? And what ancient drama hurled it into the void? The label Interstellar isn't just a flashy tag, it means this thing is an exile, evicted from its original star system and condemned to roam. Suddenly it feels less like a piece of frozen rubble, and more like a character in some endless epic trudging along without a script. You imagine a place billions of kilometers away, orbiting some forgotten sun, maybe 3i Atlas, once circled patiently in a wide, icy halo like the Oort cloud we theorize surrounds our own solar system. Picture a cold neighborhood filled with countless comets, drifting aimlessly but bound by their star's faint gravity. And then, chaos. A rogue planet shifts. A passing star nudges, or some gravitational accident kicks one unlucky comet out of orbit. In the grand shuffle of cosmic billiards, one piece gets launched like a marble flicked too hard. That's Atlas's origin story in broad strokes. A refugee set loose from its parent system never to return. Astronomers get giddy over this kind of thing because it means you're not just looking at something local, you're looking at foreign material literally imported across light years. The atoms making up Atlas may have been forged in a completely different star, cooked under pressures Earth has never seen, and cooled in a deep freeze far beyond your imagination. It's like opening your fridge and finding takeout from a restaurant in another galaxy. You don't even know how it got there, but you're definitely curious. Here's the historical hook. In 1610, Galileo turned his primitive telescope skyward and showed the world the moons of Jupiter. That moment cracked open the idea that not everything circles Earth. Fast forward to today, and astronomers are basically Galileo with caffeine and a hard drive, except instead of looking at planets in our neighbourhood, they're studying wanderers from other star systems. Historians still argue whether Galileo truly grasped the enormity of what he saw or just stumbled into it, but either way, his discovery paved the way for this kind of cosmic detective work. Without him, you wouldn't be lying here tonight listening to bedtime stories about foreign comets. Of course, you might be tempted to shrug. So what if it came from another system? Isn't a rock just a rock? But think about it. If you could scoop up a sample from Atlas, you would have alien geology in your hands. That word alien doesn't mean little green men with headsets. It means matter shaped by processes outside the sun's reach. That's not just trivia, that's chemistry class on interstellar steroids. Now here's the quirky tidbit. Some astronomers like to play guessing games about which system an object like Atlas might have come from. With enough math, tracking its velocity and trajectory, they can try to reverse engineer its flight path. It's like cosmic genealogy, but instead of tracing your great-grandmother's village, they're tracing a comet's parent star. The challenge? Space is messy, stars move, orbits shift, and after millions of years, the breadcrumbs get scattered. So while there are papers that speculate, no one can say for sure if Atlas left home from a red dwarf, a binary system, or something stranger. Historians still argue whether any of these backward tracing efforts are realistic or just academic wishful thinking. You picture the comet's possible homes. Maybe it was born near a red dwarf star in a dim system where light is rusty and skies are always twilight. Maybe it came from a binary system where two suns danced endlessly, pulling on their planets and comets like cosmic tug-of-war players. Or maybe, because the universe loves drama, it came from a system that no longer exists, its star already gone supernova, leaving Atlas as one of the last survivors of a vanished family. There's poetry in that idea, a lone traveller bearing silent witness to a star that died before humans learned how to write. The more you think about it, the more it feels like time travel. When you look at Atlas, you're not just looking across space, you're looking across ages. Its ice has preserved chemicals for billions of years, untouched, unchanged. Earth has seen continents split, mountains rise, species come and go, and meanwhile this one chunk of matter has been frozen in place, drifting through darkness, carrying a memory of somewhere else. You almost want to apologise for shining telescopes at it, like you're barging into its diary. But let's not get too romantic. Astronomers love cold hard data. They ask, what's in that ice? What kinds of dust grains make up the tail? Do its materials resemble the comets in our solar system, or are they noticeably different? If they're different, that means other star systems cook their comets with new recipes, different elements, different ratios, different building blocks for life. Suddenly, chemistry becomes the bridge between stars. One of the wild debates swirling around is whether interstellar comets like Atlas might actually be common. The discovery of Oumuamua, then Borisov, then Atlas in such quick succession makes some scientists suspect these aren't rare at all. They've just been invisible until our telescopes got better. Historians still argue whether this means comets are constantly zipping through, unnoticed, like house guests sneaking in while you're asleep. If that's true, the universe feels a lot more connected, like a train station where objects are always passing through. Here's where your brain takes a playful detour. If comets are constantly wandering between stars, doesn't that make them the ultimate cosmic gossip carriers? Imagine them picking up molecules from one system, then dropping traces in another. Maybe they're the mailmen of the galaxy, slipping letters written in carbon and hydrogen across stellar borders. You can almost hear the faint scratch of "Wish You Were Here" spelled out in icy script. And yes, if your great-great-ancestor did hitch a ride on one, then technically you're related to a popsicle that spent millions of years in deep space. Congratulations, your family reunion just got weird. To ground yourself again, you remind yourself of scale. The Milky Way is 100,000 light-years across. For a comet to cross, even a fraction of that is like a human walking across continents barefoot for centuries. And yet 3i Atlas is proof it happens. The universe is so vast, so chaotic, that even frozen pebbles manage to travel from one neighbourhood to another. And here you are, catching one in your telescopic net just long enough to marvel before it slips away again. Let's toss in a little joke to keep things cosy. If Earth were a small-town cafe, interstellar comets would be the backpackers who wander in, order 1 cup of coffee, and then vanish before the regulars even ask their names. You'd like to know their stories, but all you get is a receipt and a vague accent. Atlas is that backpacker, gone tomorrow, leaving you to wonder what kind of journey it's on. Speaking of journeys, you think about the odds stacked against survival. For Atlas to make it here, it had to dodge countless hazards. Radiation that could shatter its molecules, collisions that could pulverize it, gravitational traps that could have enslaved it in another system. Every bump along the way could have ended its story early. Yet somehow, it's here. That survival feels miraculous, even if it's just physics playing dice. And then comes the existential punchline. Earth itself might someday eject comets and asteroids into the void, creating new wanderers. Maybe billions of years from now, a creature in another system will gaze at a faint streak of light and whisper about an alien visitor, one that started here in your solar system. The circle continues. You realise that Atlas isn't just about what it's doing to humanity, it's also about what humanity might one day do to someone else. So you close your eyes for a moment, feeling the drift of it, picturing the silence of its endless journey, a frozen relic, carrying secrets you'll never fully know, sliding past Earth's orbit like a stranger brushing by on a crowded street. Its origin remains mysterious, but that's what makes it soothing. If everything were explained, there'd be no wonder left. And tonight, wonder is exactly what lulls you deeper towards sleep. You're lying there, still thinking about how 3i Atlas got flung from its home, but another picture pushes in now, the people who actually found it. Because while comets may glide through space in silence, down here it's anything but quiet. You imagine astronomers squinting at screens, hunched over keyboards, chasing faint pixels across the dark. If Atlas is a wandering traveller, then they're the insomniac paparazzi, desperate to catch its good side before it vanishes. It's almost funny how ordinary the discovery moment really is. No dramatic Hollywood scene of telescopes swiveling while klaxons blare. No, usually it's just a grad student at 3 a.m. sipping stale coffee, watching a smudge appear in the survey data. The Atlas system itself, that's Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert system, isn't even glamorous. It's a set of robotic telescopes in Hawaii, built to scan the skies for potentially dangerous objects. Basically, the Planetary Neighbourhood Watch. They sweep the heavens, looking for anything that moves differently than the stars. And there it was, a faint streak of light shifting between frames. At first, it might have looked like an error, or maybe a passing satellite, but with more data, the orbit became clear. Not local, not bound to the sun in the usual way, interstellar. You can almost hear the researcher muttering, "Well, that's weird," while trying not to spill their drink on the keyboard. If you've ever stayed awake way too late scrolling through nonsense, you already understand astronomers on these nights. There's a mix of exhaustion, obsession, and low-grade panic, because you know if you don't follow up, someone else will. Astronomy is a patient science, but discoveries like this reward the insomniacs. No wonder many of them joke that their job is basically the world's fanciest all-nighter. Here's your historical detour. In 1781, William Herschel discovered Uranus by accident while systematically scanning the sky. Historians still argue whether he actually realised it was a planet at first, or thought it was just another comet. What matters is that the discovery changed humanity's map of the solar system forever. That story echoes through time, an astronomer alone at night, staring at a dot, realising the universe just got bigger. Now, in the 21st century, Atlas repeats that pattern. Only instead of one man with a telescope, it's an array of computers and sleepless teams with Slack channels buzzing. And here's a quirky little tidbit. Many modern discoveries aren't spotted by human eyes at all. They're flagged by algorithms, automatic systems trained to detect motion. So technically, 3i Atlas might have been noticed by a line of code before a person even glanced at it. Imagine being the astronomer who wakes up, opens their inbox, and finds a message. "Good morning. We may have found something interstellar. That's not quite as cinematic as Galileo, but hey, it works. But sleeplessness is a universal part of the process. You imagine the observatory dome in Hawaii at 2 a.m, wind rattling, instruments humming. Inside, someone's running back-to-back exposures, trying to confirm the orbit. Outside, tourists are probably sipping cocktails by a pool, unaware that above their heads, an alien visitor is being tracked. That's one of those cosmic contrasts, a world obsessed with daily grind, while just overhead, entire stories unfold in silence. The effort doesn't stop at discovery. Once 3i Atlas was flagged, telescopes worldwide scrambled to take their turn. Professional observatories, backyard enthusiasts, even satellite systems pointed their lenses toward the newcomer. Every observation mattered, because the comet was moving fast and would soon fade beyond reach. Astronomers live with this urgency. Once an interstellar object is gone, it's gone forever. You either catch it now, or you write an essay about the chance you missed. And because astronomy thrives on community, you can picture the emails flying. One group in Europe confirms the orbit. Another team in North America submits data. Amateurs in Australia snap images. It becomes a global relay race, each passing the baton before the comet slips too far across the sky. That's one thing you find oddly comforting. Even in an age of endless division, scientists can still unite over a faint speck of light. There's also a certain humour in how underfunded all this is. You'd think Protect Earth from Dangerous Objects would earn NASA a blank cheque. But no, budgets are tight, instruments are old, and many astronomers joke that they do planetary defence on the price of a used car. The Atlas system itself was funded in part by grants that barely keep it running. So when they find something extraordinary, it feels a bit like someone winning the lottery with a handful of spare change. Meanwhile, you imagine the astronomers themselves, pale, blinking under fluorescent lights, subsisting on instant noodles and passion for data. They're not glamorous action heroes, but they're the reason you even know Atlas exists. And while the rest of the world yawns, they keep staring upward, stealing moments from sleep in exchange for cosmic secrets. There's also the drama of interpretation. When Oumuamua was discovered, some astronomers argued it might be artificial. That debate turned into headlines, books, even conspiracy theories. With Atlas, the community was more cautious, probably because nobody wanted a repeat of the alien probe circus. But still, under the surface, the same whispers hummed. Could this visitor tell us something fundamentally new? Historians still argue whether scientists should even indulge those questions publicly, or if speculation just feeds the wrong headlines. It's almost like astronomy has two parallel lives. In one, it's careful measurements, dry charts, peer-reviewed journals. In the other, it's Twitter threads, memes, and late-night debates about whether comets are cosmic mail carriers. Atlas lives in both worlds. To the astronomer awake at midnight, it's a set of coordinates and exposure times. To you lying here in the dark, it's a dreamy visitor from another sun. Let's pause for a quirky mental image. What if comets kept a scrapbook? Each time they're observed, another blurry telescope photo gets pasted inside. Maybe Atlas has a page with grainy dots labelled Earth 2020s. You can picture it sighing a not my best angle, while streaking past at 60 kilometers per second. Astronomers aren't exactly fashion photographers, but hey, they try. All this makes you think about the relationship between sleep and science. Astronomers often flip their schedules, living like nocturnal animals. Their work depends on clear skies, so they nap during the day and wake at dusk, ready to chase faint streaks until sunrise. You, lying in bed, are sort of syncing with them, letting your imagination follow their routine, feeling the hush of night as a time not of rest but of discovery. And here's a historical aside to anchor it. In the late 1800s, Edward Charles Pickering ran the Harvard College Observatory and employed a team of women known as the Harvard Computers to catalogue stars. They worked tirelessly, often into the night, poring over photographic plates. Historians still argue whether they were credited fairly, but their work laid the foundation for modern astrophysics. Now, in the 21st century, their spirit echoes in every sleepless grad student staring at data of Atlas. The tools have changed, the fatigue is timeless. What fascinates you most is how fragile the whole process is. If the Atlas system had been down that night, if the weather had been cloudy, if the algorithm had glitched, this interstellar visitor might have slipped past unnoticed. That realization makes you oddly protective of the astronomers. They don't just study the skies, they guard humanity's chance to glimpse the extraordinary. And as you think about their sleepless devotion, you start to wonder, what does it do to them, personally? Constant night shifts, missed family dinners, the quiet loneliness of observatories on mountaintops. There's a certain romance in it, yes, but also a toll. Maybe that's part of why their discoveries resonate so strongly. They've traded comfort for curiosity, and every new comet is their reward. By the time you finish this train of thought, you feel a little more tender toward the people behind the telescopes. They aren't faceless scientists in lab coats. They're dreamers with messy desks and half-empty mugs, doing their best to keep humanity's eyes open. Without them, 3i Atlas would just be another anonymous wanderer in the dark. Thanks to them, you get to whisper about it tonight. And as your eyes grow heavier, you let the image fade. A telescope dome cracked open under the stars, machines humming, a comet gliding through their crosshairs. Above, the universe is vast and indifferent. Below, a handful of sleepless astronomers make sure we don't miss our cue. The comet is caught in your imagination now, but it isn't sitting still, it's racing, slicing through the solar system with a speed that makes everything around you feel sluggish. You glance at your phone, at the little battery icon creeping from 78% to 7% over an hour, and then you imagine 3i Atlas, which doesn't creep at all. It barrels. It zooms past planets and moons like a sprinter who accidentally wandered onto a jogging path. 60 kilometers per second. That's the figure astronomers toss around, as if your brain can casually picture it. But let's break it down. In the time it takes you to yawn, this comet has already crossed the distance from New York to Los Angeles. Before you even finish thinking, wow, that's fast, it's already looped around Earth. Twice. Suddenly, you feel like the slowest thing in the universe, just lying in bed with your socks half on. Speed in space is weird though, because it doesn't look like speed. From your perspective on Earth, 3i Atlas glides gently across the stars. You need hours of exposure time to even notice it shifting. The trick is that everything in space is already moving ridiculously fast. Earth itself is hurtling around the Sun at about 30 kilometers per second. The Sun is orbiting the center of the galaxy at over 200 kilometers per second, and yet you don't feel any of it. You just sip your tea and complain that your Wi-Fi is slow, blissfully unaware that your entire planet is a bullet. There's a historical echo here. In the 1600s, Johannes Kepler published his laws of planetary motion, showing that planets sweep faster near the Sun and slower farther out. Historians still argue whether he truly grasped the mechanics or if he stumbled on elegant math by accident. But either way, it gave humanity its first real glimpse of orbital speed. Now, centuries later, Atlas is proof that Kepler's math stretches even beyond our Sun. It's a visitor obeying the same rules, just with a passport stamped in another system. But let's drop the math for a second. Think sensory. If you were standing on Atlas, well, hovering, since gravity wouldn't keep your boots planted, you wouldn't actually feel the speed. There's no roaring wind in space, no whoosh, no speedometer flashing red. You'd float in eerie silence, the stars frozen around you, even though you're traveling so fast that a Ferrari would cry itself to sleep in comparison. It's like sitting on a train with the blinds closed. You only realize how fast you're going when you peek out the window and see the landscape blur. And yet, here's the quirky tidbit. Comets like Atlas don't always keep the same speed forever. They get slingshotted by gravity, speeding up as they approach the Sun, then slowing as they climb back out. It's cosmic roller coaster physics, and the Sun is the ride operator. The trick is, interstellar objects like Atlas aren't bound to return, so they zoom in once, accelerate, and then vanish into the dark like someone who crashed a party and left before anyone got their name. Astronomers obsess over these numbers. They measure velocity so precisely that they can tell when something doesn't quite fit the local crowd. That's how they knew Oumuamua was foreign. It wasn't just the shape or the lack of a tail, it was the speed. It was moving too fast for the Sun to reel it in, proof that it came from elsewhere. The same with Borisov, the same with Atlas. Historians still argue whether these first three interstellar guests are the tip of the iceberg or just a lucky streak of detections, but the speed data makes one thing clear: they're not ours. The mind-bending part is how relative all this is. Imagine two cars merging on a highway. If they're both going 100 kilometers per hour in the same direction, they barely notice each other. If one is going 100 and the other 60, the difference feels dramatic. Space works the same way. Objects whiz past each other at dizzying speeds. But if they're synced, the relative difference can be calm. That's why astronauts in orbit don't feel like they're tearing around Earth at 28,000 kilometers per hour. To them, everything nearby is moving too. You though, you're the slow pedestrian watching the freeway from a bridge. Atlas doesn't slow down for gawkers. There's another fun angle. If you could somehow harness that velocity, you'd have the ultimate spacecraft. Forget waiting decades for probes to crawl toward the next star. Atlas is already doing it naturally. Some scientists even speculate that studying these interstellar comets might give clues about how to launch our own objects on similar paths. Historians still argue whether humanity will ever manage to fling probes between stars in meaningful numbers, but every comet like Atlas is a reminder that nature already cracked the code. Your imagination drifts to absurd comparisons. Atlas versus human inventions. A commercial jetliner cruises at around 900 kilometers per hour. The fastest human-made object, the Parker-Soyuz probe, reached speeds over 150 kilometers per second when slingshotted near the sun. But that took cutting-edge engineering, billions in funding, and decades of planning. Atlas, meanwhile, does 60 kilometers per second casually, no fuel tank, no mission control, or no applause, just a frozen lump coasting through the void, flexing without trying. If rocks had egos, this one would be unbearable. But here's a twist of humour for you. Down here on Earth, humans get excited about shaving a few minutes off their commute, or bragging about how fast their internet downloads a file. Up there, Atlas is crossing distances that make continents look like smudges. Imagine telling the Comet, I upgraded to fibre optic internet. It would just shrug, or whatever the icy equivalent of a shrug is, because it has crossed light years without buffering once. Speed has another layer of significance, though. It shapes the way we can study Atlas. Because it's moving so quickly, telescopes only have a brief window to collect data. It's like trying to sketch a portrait of someone running past your window. You don't get the luxury of long, careful study. You grab what you can before it's gone. That urgency is what makes astronomers pull those sleepless nights you imagined earlier. They're not just racing the comet, they're racing time itself. Think back to history again. In 1910, Halley's Comet returned, and humanity prepared with excitement and dread. Some bought comet pills claiming to protect them from toxic gases. Others sold bottled comet air. Historians still argue whether the panic was exaggerated by newspapers or genuinely widespread, but either way it shows how humans handle sky visitors, with fascination, fear, and a dash of nonsense. Atlas didn't bring quite the same hysteria, but its speed made the panic sharper. There's no second act. Once it's gone forever. And here's your quirky image of the night. If you could attach a GoPro to Atlas, the footage would be the most boring viral video ever. A black sky, unmoving stars, endless stillness. Only the time-lapse would reveal the truth, that the comet is sprinting across unimaginable distances, while the rest of the galaxy barely blinks. It's a motion, hidden inside stillness, like a secret the universe only shares if you know how to measure. You roll over in a bed and feel the irony of it. You live in a world where speed is obsession. Faster delivery, faster downloads, faster lifestyles. And yet the most awe-inspiring speed of all is invisible, silent, and indifferent. Atlas doesn't care about efficiency or deadlines. It doesn't even care that you've noticed. It just moves, a frozen reminder that motion doesn't always need applause. And as your eyelids grow heavier, you feel yourself sinking with that motion, not racing, not frantic, but drifting, gliding, letting the thought of endless speed carry you into a slower, softer state. The comet streaks through the cosmos at impossible velocity, while you drift towards sleep at the gentlest pace imaginable. Two journeys, side by side in very different registers. Speed fades into distance in your imagination, and distance fades into closeness. Because while 3i Atlas feels like a faraway visitor, it leaves behind tiny traces that may be closer than you think. You start to wonder, what if the dust of an interstellar comet already sprinkles through Earth's skies, already slips into your lungs with each breath, already coats your windowsill without asking permission? Suddenly the vast cosmos doesn't feel so distant. It feels inhaled. Comets are messy travellers. They shed material constantly, trailing streams of dust and ice crystals that scatter like breadcrumbs across space. When those trails cross Earth's orbit, you call them meteor showers. The Perseids, the Leonids, the Geminids. Each is a cosmic handshake between your planet and a comet's leftover scraps. And while Atlas itself might not pass close enough to trigger a visible shower, its dust still matters. Interstellar objects don't glide through the solar system without leaving fingerprints. Here's your mainstream historical anchor. In 1833, the Leonid meteor storm lit up the skies over North America so intensely that people thought the world was ending. Historians still argue whether the panic was fueled more by religious fervour or by sheer awe, but the fact remains, Earth has always been a dust collector. Every meteor you see is a grain of cometary material burning up overhead. Atlas II leaves some trace, even if it's just a handful of particles drifting invisibly across the void. Quirky tidbit time. Scientists estimate that Earth absorbs around 40,000 tons of space dust every year. That's right, you're basically marinating in extraterrestrial sprinkles. Most of it is too tiny to notice. Microscopic grains that settle into the oceans, mix with soil, and even end up in your bloodstream. There's a non-zero chance that a molecule in your body right now once belonged to a comet. Talk about cosmic recycling. If you've ever sneezed, you may have expelled stardust without realizing. The thing about interstellar dust is that it could be chemically different. Comets from our solar system carry a familiar recipe: water ice, carbon compounds, silicates. But Atlas may carry exotic variations, ratios of carbon, nitrogen, or oxygen shaped by a star with a different chemical fingerprint. Astronomers love this possibility because it means analysing comet dust is like reading the menu of another star's kitchen. Historians still argue whether such dust can survive the journey intact or if it burns up entirely on entry, but the idea itself is intoxicating, inhaling whispers from another system. You picture the process: Atlas drifting by, shedding a faint mist of particles. Some escape, some linger, some continue their orbit until they collide with Earth's atmosphere years or even centuries later. Invisible fireworks, unnoticed by the crowds below. One grain might streak as a meteor across the desert sky. Another might tumble quietly into the ocean, sinking into sediment where no one ever finds it. Another still might cling stubbornly to the air, inhaled by a sleeping human, maybe even you. Pause here. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Who knows what rode that breath? The air is thick with the past. Dinosaurs inhaled some of the same nitrogen you're breathing. Volcanic eruptions flavoured the oxygen, and maybe, just maybe, an atom from 3i Atlas drifts through your lungs tonight, sneaking into your bloodstream like an interstellar hitchhiker. It's a little unsettling, but also comforting. The cosmos is inside you whether you invite it or not. Historically, comets have always been blamed for illness. In the 14th century, during the Black Death, people whispered that poisonous miasmas from a passing comet were to blame. Historians still argue whether these fears were pure superstition or faint echoes of real phenomena. After all, comet dust could theoretically alter atmospheric chemistry. But the belief that comets shed dangerous particles into Earth's air was widespread. Imagine looking up at the tail of Halley's Comet and convincing yourself that every shimmering strand was toxic smoke drifting down. It wasn't true, of course, but the idea lingers. And yet, here's the quirky angle. In 1910, when Halley's Comet returned, entrepreneurs cashed in on that fear by selling comet pills to protect against supposed poison gases. Some even sold bottled comet air. You laugh now, but then you remember how people in your own time panic buy things whenever doom is predicted. Maybe not comet pills, but hand sanitizer and toilet paper. Humanity never really changes, it just updates the label on its fears. Thinking of dust, you realise how much of human history is written in layers of it. Ice cores from Antarctica trap tiny flecks of cosmic debris, preserving records of ancient meteor showers. Archaeologists find microscopic spherules in sediments, hints of long-gone impacts. And in laboratories, scientists sift meteorite fragments under microscopes, hoping to find amino acids or other organic molecules, the very building blocks of life. Atlas, if its dust could be captured, might add an entirely new entry to that record, an interstellar signature etched in a single grain. Here's a fun mental picture. What if vacuum cleaners came with cosmic particle detectors? You'd push it across your living room carpet and suddenly a little light would blink. Congratulations, you just picked up a molecule from beyond the solar system. It would turn household chores into archaeological digs. Dust bunnies wouldn't just be dust, they'd be archives of galactic history. Your allergies would feel much more impressive. But back to the bigger frame. dust matters not just because of what it is, but because of what it does. Those tiny grains falling into Earth's atmosphere deposit elements that feed ecosystems. Some scientists suggest that comets delivered much of Earth's early water and organic chemistry. Without dust, maybe you wouldn't even exist. Historians still argue whether the majority of life's ingredients came from comets or from Earth's own volcanic stews, but the panspermia idea refuses to fade. Every new comet discovery stirs it up again. Maybe life really is dust-born, scattered like seeds across the galaxy. Think of that for a moment. If Atlas carries amino acids, then its dust could theoretically seed life somewhere else one day. A grain landing on a young planet's ocean, sparking chemistry that leads to cells, creatures, civilizations. Somewhere in the far future, an alien could look up at their night sky and wonder if their ancestors came from a comet just like this one. That thought makes you feel oddly parental toward Atlas, as if humanity isn't just watching it pass but sending it off with quiet blessings. The irony is that most people never notice dust at all. They sneeze, wipe it from furniture, complain about allergies. Dust feels trivial, dirty, mundane. But cosmic dust is the exact opposite. It's profound, the residue of stars, the scattered ash of galaxies. You live in a cloud of it, swim in it, breathe it. You are, in some sense, dust rearranged into consciousness. Maybe that's why Atlas stirs your thoughts. It reminds you of what you already are. Your mind drifts now to a more intimate image. Lying in bed, a thin shaft of moonlight falling across your bookshelf. Tiny motes float in the beam, golden specks swirling lazily. They look harmless, even pretty. And yet among them, unseen, could be a grain that travelled across the gulf between stars. Something Atlas shed long before you were born. You watch the dust shimmer and realise it isn't just clutter. It's testimony. That thought calms you. Dust is patient. It doesn't care how fast Atlas moves or how panicked humans once were. It simply falls, settles, waits. And tonight, as you breathe it in, you feel yourself settling too, like a particle drifting gently through air, carried on currents you don't control, finding rest on whatever surface welcomes you next. Dust swirls through your imagination, but your thoughts don't linger on microscopes and molecules for long. Instead, they drift backward, far past telescopes, algorithms, and data charts. You wonder, what did people think of comets before astronomy became a science? Before words like interstellar or orbital velocity existed? The answer, of course, is terror. Ancient humans did not shrug at a comet the way you do when your phone buzzes with another news notification. No, they saw those bright fuzzy intruders in the sky and panicked. To them, comets weren't gentle science experiments. They were omens. A comet's tail looked like a flaming sword, a streak of celestial fire, and humans have always had a flair for drama. If something weird appeared in the heavens, it must mean something weird was about to happen down on Earth. That logic stuck for thousands of years. Take 44 BCE, for example. After Julius Caesar's assassination, a comet appeared in the sky over Rome. Historians still argue whether it was actually Halley's comet or another visitor. But the Romans took it as proof that Caesar's soul had ascended to the gods. Imagine the relief. Murder a dictator, then have the Psy itself provide the PR spin. Personally, the assassins looked a little less guilty. And Caesar himself got divine branding. Talk about celestial marketing. But comets weren't always comforting. In medieval Europe, they were usually bad news. Chronicles are full of grim entries. A comet appeared, then famine, then plague, then war. You can see why comets had such a bad reputation. Every time one showed up, something terrible happened soon after. Of course, soon after could mean years later, but details didn't matter. People connected dots, even when those dots were galaxies apart. Here's your quirky tidbit. In the 11th century, Halley's comet was famously stitched into the Bayeux tapestry, appearing above King Harold's head just before the Battle of Hastings. The Normans saw it as a sign of their impending victory. The Anglo-Saxons saw it as doom. Same comet, different spin. Historians still argue whether anyone at the time recognised it as the same recurring comet seen centuries before, or if each appearance felt like a brand new omen. Either way, comets became woven, literally, into history's fabric. You imagine it. Peasants standing in muddy fields, priests in drafty chapels, kings on thrones, all tilting their heads back, staring at a glowing smear in the night sky. No telescopes, no science, just fear and awe. Maybe someone whispered, "What is it?" And someone else muttered, "God's warning." And that was that. no peer review necessary. There's a certain poetry in how comets became cosmic scapegoats. If crops failed, blame the comet. If plague struck, blame the comet. If your cousin ran off with your goat, why not blame the comet? It was the ultimate excuse, streaking helpfully across the sky right when you needed a villain. And let's be honest, even today you'd probably feel a little unsettled if a giant glowing sword suddenly appeared above your city. Always. You can laugh at superstition, but your nervous system doesn't. The irony is that comets were often visible for weeks, even months, lingering night after night. Imagine how oppressive that must have felt. Not a one-night wonder like a shooting star, but a long, slow burn. Every evening, you'd look up and see the same fiery tail hanging there, reminding you that fate was looming. It's like a cosmic loading icon that never goes away. Try sleeping soundly with that hovering above your roof. Here's another historical example. In 1456, Halley's Comet appeared again, and Pope Calixtus III actually issued a papal bull against it, lumping the comet together with the invading Ottoman Turks as threats to Christendom. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine theological stance or just convenient propaganda. But either way, imagine writing an official decree against a ball of ice. You almost want to picture the comet receiving the memo and politely turning around. Your quirky brain, though, can't resist picturing comets as slightly smug in all this. Every time they showed up, entire civilizations freaked out. You wonder if comets keep subtop score. Halley, 1456, caused mass panic, papal decree near 1010 chaos, humans saw doom, comets saw fanfare. Meanwhile, in cultures outside Europe, comets carried different meanings. In China, court astronomers carefully recorded comet appearances for centuries, treating them as warnings of dynastic change. An emperor's fate could be tied to a streak in the sky. In Mesoamerica, comets were seen as harbingers of catastrophe too, sometimes linked with fire or war. Yet in some cultures, comets weren't always bad. Occasionally they symbolized renewal or transformation, like cosmic reminders that the old must fall for the new to rise. Historians still argue whether these interpretations reflect actual astronomical patterns, since comets often coincide with cyclical events, or just the human tendency to see patterns where none exist. And then you remember, fear sells. Just as modern media thrives on dramatic headlines about asteroids the size of a skyscraper whizzing past Earth, ancient leaders knew comets were perfect for stirring up attention. A ruler could frame a comet as a sign of divine approval or weaponize it as proof that enemies were doomed. Either way, it worked. People believed what the heavens displayed, because who were they to argue with the sky? Pause for a moment and picture it yourself. A quiet village centuries ago. The night is darker than you can ever experience today. Free from street lamps or glowing billboards, the stars blaze in numbers you can't imagine. And then, one night, a strange ghostly plume appears where none was before. The whole community gathers in hushed silence, staring. Some pray, some cry, some simply gape, wondering if the world is ending. That's the mood comets carried, both dread and awe tangled together. Here's your modern-day joke. Back then, people thought comets announced disaster. Today, if a comet showed up glowing vividly for weeks, most people would be more concerned about whether their phones could capture a decent photo for Instagram. The panic would be replaced by hashtags. Comet vibes, #end-off-world aesthetic. Humanity still craves meaning in the sky, but now it comes with filters. It's strange to think how far you've come. The same streak that once made emperors tremble is now measured in kilograms of dust per second. What was once divine wrath is now a PowerPoint slide at an astronomy conference. The comet hasn't changed. You have. And yet lying here tonight, you can't quite shake the sense that comets do carry weight. If not supernatural, then at least psychological. They yank your gaze upward. They remind you how small you are. They force you to remember that the universe doesn't revolve around your to-do list. And maybe that's the lingering superstition you can still sympathize with. Not fear exactly, but reverence. A sense that when something strange streaks across the heavens, you should pay attention, not because it dooms you, but because it humbles you. So as your mind softens toward rest, you picture those ancient eyes gazing at the same sky. Farmers, priests, kings, poets, all looking up at comets with awe and dread. You feel linked across centuries by that same upward glance. The difference is that you know what a comet is, and they didn't. But the wonder, that part hasn't changed. The ancient peasants and popes fade out of your imagination, and suddenly you're back in the 21st century, your time, your feeds, your glowing screens. If medieval Europe panicked with church bells and prayers, modern humanity panics with clickbait headlines and live streams. You scroll and there it is. Interstellar comet could change everything we know. Or maybe 3i Atlas heading toward Earth. Should you worry? You don't even have to click the article. The headline has already done its job, feeding you just enough dread to keep you awake. That's the funny thing about comets today. You don't hear about them in church sermons or royal proclamations. You hear about them on news apps sandwiched between celebrity divorces and sports scores. The tone is less apocalypse and more apocalypse-light. A comet is treated like a cosmic scandal. Dramatic, vaguely threatening, but also kind of entertaining. And just like a scandal, the details usually don't matter. People read the headline, maybe skim the first sentence, and then share it with a caption like, "LOL, we're doomed." Of course, this isn't totally new. Even in the 19th century, newspapers loved to stir drama about comets. When Halley's Comet returned in 1910, papers reported that Earth would pass through its tail, which supposedly contained deadly cyanogen gas. Never mind that the concentration was so low it couldn't possibly harm anyone. The result? Panic buying, comet gas masks, comet elixirs. Historians still argue whether the fear was genuinely widespread or mostly exaggerated by sensational reporting. But the headlines certainly fanned the flames. Sound familiar? Replace cyanogen gas with mystery alien microbe and you've basically got a 2020s news cycle. Here's your quirky tidbit. When 3i Atlas was announced, some tabloids actually recycled the comet might end Earth storyline, even though astronomers immediately said it posed no threat. One headline screamed about doomsday visitor, while the actual article admitted it would miss Earth by millions of kilometers. That's like warning you about a car crash because someone took the same highway exit as you. The cosmic scale just doesn't translate well into human fears, so the headlines take the easy route, hype the danger, bury the reassurance in the paragraph 4. And you can't blame people for clicking. There's something irresistible about a looming celestial visitor. You'll ignore 50 headlines about tax reform, but the moment you see giant comet, your lizard brain perks up. It's the same instinct your ancestors had while staring at glowing tails in the sky, except now you're doing it with Wi-Fi. Meanwhile, the astronomers who actually discovered Atlas must feel like reluctant hype managers. They publish careful orbital data, discuss magnitudes and uncertainties, and the next morning they wake up to see headlines declaring aliens in bold caps. Historians still argue whether scientists should lean into the hype to secure funding or push back against it to preserve credibility. It's a delicate balance. Without drama, nobody listens. With too much drama, nobody believes you. You imagine the press conference, tired astronomer explaining it poses no threat to Earth. A reporter interrupts. But could it? The astronomer sighs. The probability is virtually zero. Another reporter. So you're saying there's a chance? Cue the headlines. Comet may hit Earth, scientists admit. It's like watching someone twist your grocery list into a murder mystery. There's also the modern twist of social media. A comet announcement is basically chum thrown into the digital ocean and instantly memes swim in. Someone photoshops Atlas with sunglasses. Someone else sets it to music with a dramatic countdown. You scroll through TikTok and find a video of someone explaining how the comet's energy is going to shift your zodiac sign. It's chaos, but it's oddly comforting chaos. Everyone finds a way to make the cosmic visitor fit into their preferred narrative. Doom, jokes, astrology, even cooking recipes inspired by comet cocktails. You laugh at it, but you also see the pattern. The same fear and fascination that once fueled omens now fuels algorithms. The comet hasn't changed. The delivery system has. Instead of a priest shouting warnings from a pulpit, you've got a YouTuber whispering about government cover-ups into a microphone. Instead of royal scribes recording comets as signs of dynastic change, you've got Reddit threads debating whether Atlas is secretly a spaceship. Historians still argue whether the internet amplifies superstition or just gives it new clothes, but the end result is the same. Humans love to panic share the sky. Of course, the panic rarely lasts. Comets don't trend forever. One week it's all anyone talks about. The next it's forgotten in favour of a celebrity feud. You can almost picture Atlas gliding by, watching humans get distracted halfway through its visit. "Really?" it mutters. "I crossed light years for this." And now you're obsessed with a viral dance. Poor Comet, it deserves better PR. There's also the irony that genuine comet news, like the chance to study interstellar chemistry, barely makes headlines. That doesn't spark clicks. Nobody rushes to share scientists analyse volatile molecules in coma of 3I Atlas, but slap doomsday rock on the same object and suddenly it's everywhere. The comet itself doesn't care what humans call it, but you can't help feeling a little embarrassed on behalf of your species. Still, the media circus does serve a purpose. It pulls eyes upward, even briefly. For all the distortion and exaggeration, a headline about a comet gets people to look at the sky, if only to wonder. That's something your ancestors did instinctively, but something you often forget to do today. In a strange way, the panic and memes are just modern rituals of attention. They remind you, even through laughter, that you're still part of a universe much bigger than yourself. And here's your joke to tuck in with. When ancient people saw comets, they thought they meant the end of the world. When modern people see comets, they wonder if it'll affect their Wi-Fi signal. Progress, I guess. So you set your phone down, close your eyes, and let the noise of headlines fade. Atlas isn't doom, and it isn't salvation. It's just passing through, indifferent to hashtags and headlines. The panic belongs to humanity, not the comet. And as you drift closer to sleep, you realise that panic is just another way of saying wonder dressed in anxiety's clothing. You've chuckled at the headlines, but admit it, there's a tiny part of you that still wonders, what if? The question hangs in your chest like the hush before a thunderclap. Could 3I Atlas, or any interstellar wanderer, actually hit us? You know the astronomers say no danger, you know the probabilities are microscopic, but your brain is annoyingly good at ignoring math in favour of panic, and panic loves a comet. Start with the basics. Atlas is on a hyperbolic orbit. That means it's not bound to the sun, not looping around like a loyal planet, but zooming in once and then sailing out forever. Think of it like someone opening the wrong door at a party, stepping inside just long enough to spook everyone, and then leaving without a word. Its path has been calculated, measured, charted. No impact. Astronomers are clear, but the phrase no impact is a little like unsinkable ship. Technically true, but humans can't resist worrying about exceptions. Here's a historical anchor for your nerves. In 1908, an object, likely a comet fragment, exploded over Tunguska, Siberia, flattening 80 million trees across 2,000 square kilometers. Historians still argue whether it was a comet, an asteroid, or something stranger. But the devastation was real. No crater, just shockwaves and fire. If that had happened over New York instead of Siberia, history books would tell the story very differently. So yes, impacts can happen. Your anxiety has receipts. And here's your quirky tidbit. Earth is hit by about 100 tons of meteoritic material every single day, not Tunguska-sized. Of course, usually dust and pebbles that burn up as shooting stars. But still, technically, the planet is always under bombardment. You live on a rock with a cosmic target painted on it, and so far you've been lucky. Your continued existence is essentially a win streak in an interstellar casino. Astronomers like to talk in probabilities. The chance of a comet like Atlas hitting Earth is vanishingly small, smaller than your odds of being struck by lightning, winning the lottery, and being eaten by a shark on the same day. But vanishingly small isn't zero, and humans have a long history of focusing on the 1 in a million. Just look at gambling or reality TV shows. You're terrible at ignoring the impossible. Part of the unease comes from scale. If Atlas did hit Earth, it wouldn't be a minor inconvenience. Even a comet only a kilometre wide could unleash energy equivalent to billions of nuclear bombs. The impact would vaporise everything near ground zero, kick up dust clouds that blot out the sun, collapse ecosystems and rewrite history. It would be an extinction-level event, the kind of thing dinosaurs knew all too well. You can almost picture the headlines, Comet Atlas, bad news for literally everyone. The tricky part is that impacts don't happen on human timescales. A once-in-100,000-year event doesn't sound threatening to you personally, but in cosmic terms that's basically any minute now. Historians still argue whether humanity takes these risks seriously enough, or whether our short-term obsession with quarterly profits blinds us to long-term survival. After all, telescopes that scan for near-Earth objects run on budgets smaller than blockbuster movie franchises. You spend more money on superhero films about saving the world than on actually saving the world. And yet you find comfort in the math. Astronomers are obsessive about trajectories. Once they lock down an orbit, they can predict a comet's path centuries into the future. They can say with confidence, this rock will miss us by millions of kilometers. It's like watching a baseball fly through the air and knowing it won't land anywhere near your head. Atlas, by all calculations, is just a flyball into the stands, not a fastball aimed at Earth's face. Still, there's always the wild card. What if it fragments? What if its path shifts slightly? What if the models are wrong? You know the answer. Astronomers factor that in. They watch closely. And if something truly dangerous ever appeared, you'd hear about it from more than just tabloids. There'd be emergency meetings, plans, maybe even talk of deflection missions. Right now, though, the only thing at risk is your sleep schedule. Let's take a detour into history again. In 1773, the French astronomer Charles Messier carefully catalogued comet positions to help avoid confusion. Historians still argue whether he intended it as pure science or just a way to claim bragging rights. But his work laid the groundwork for systematic comet tracking. Without people like Messier, you'd still be stuck in the era of comets as omens. Instead, you have orbital mechanics, error bars, and a cozy reassurance that Atlas is not coming for your city. Quirky side note, if a comet did threaten Earth, Hollywood already has a plan. Movies like Armageddon and Deep Impact taught you that the solution is to send oil drillers or heroic astronauts to blow it up. Real scientists laugh at this. Blowing up a comet is more likely to turn one giant impact into thousands of smaller ones, like trading one hammer strike for a shotgun blast. The real solutions involve nudging an object gently years in advance, using gravity tractors, solar sails, or laser arrays. It's less dramatic, but far more effective. And sadly for Hollywood, involves fewer slow-motion hero shots. Thinking about all this, you realise the question isn't really, will Atlas hit us? But, what does it mean that it could? The faint possibility forces humanity to look up, to remember vulnerability, to admit that even in your age of Wi-Fi and skyscrapers, you're still living under the same sky that terrified medieval villagers. The comet's threat is less physical than psychological. It pokes at your survival instinct, reminding you that the universe is not under human control, and that reminder is oddly soothing. Because in the end, worrying won't stop a comet. If Atlas were truly on a collision course, there's nothing you personally could do but hug your loved ones and hope the telescopes had a plan. The math says you're safe, astronomers say you're safe, but your imagination lingers on the edge, playing out the what-ifs as bedtime stories. You roll over thinking about how fragile life really is, but also how persistent. Earth has been struck before, devastated before, reshaped before, and yet here you are, breathing, worrying, telling stories. The comet will pass, Earth will spin on, and you'll still be here tomorrow, scrolling headlines and sipping coffee. So could it hit us? The answer is simple, no. But the question itself lingers because it connects you to everyone who's ever stared at the night sky and wondered if the glowing stranger above was friend or foe. That shared fear, stretched across centuries, makes you feel less alone. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you let that possibility dissolve, not as panic, but as a lullaby of cosmic humility. You've convinced yourself that Atlas isn't going to hit Earth, but the question nags at you in a different way now. Not will it kill us, but could it have created us? That sounds absurd at first. How could a frozen rock from the stars have anything to do with your heartbeat, your ability to hum along with bad pop songs in the car? And yet the longer you stare upward, the more the idea makes sense. Maybe comets aren't just destroyers. Maybe they're gardeners, carrying seeds of life across the cosmos. This is the old theory of panspermia, life scattered through space on comets and meteors, drifting between stars until it lands somewhere fertile. It's not a new thought. As far back as the 5th century BC, the Greek philosopher Anaxagoras suggested that seeds of life were spread everywhere in the universe, waiting for the right soil. Historians still argue whether he meant literal seeds or some proto-metaphorical idea, but the spark of panspermia was already lit. Millennia later, scientists still can't shake it. Here's the quirky tidbit. Actual experiments show amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, can form in comet-like conditions. In 2004, when NASA's Stardust mission flew through the coma of Comet Wild 2 and brought particles back to Earth, Scientists found glycine, one of those amino acids, hiding in the samples. That's not proof of life, but it is proof that comets carry the right chemistry kit. Imagine a cosmic care package tumbling through space. Ice, carbon, nitrogen, organics. Pretty much everything you'd need to whip up a recipe for biology, minus the oven timer. Now, zoom in on your own body for a moment. DNA, the twisting ladder of life, is built on nucleotides, which themselves rely on simple molecules like adenine and guanine. Lab experiments have shown these molecules can form in simulated comet ice blasted with ultraviolet light. In other words, the ingredients of your genetic code can be cooked in space, sprinkled across galaxies and delivered via comets. You, lying here with your blanket tucked under your chin, might literally be stardust arranged into a person by comet dust. And here's a historical parallel. In the 1950s, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey ran their famous primordial soup experiment, zapping a mix of gases with electrical sparks to mimic lightning in Earth's early atmosphere. They produced amino acids, proving that life's ingredients could form naturally. Historians still argue whether that experiment truly mirrors early Earth conditions, but it cracked open the door. Combine that idea with comet chemistry, and suddenly you've got the two plausible routes. Maybe life brewed in Earth's own cauldron, or maybe it was delivered from afar on an icy comet. Maybe both. Pause and let yourself imagine the scene billions of years ago. Earth is young, hot, battered, oceans steaming. Into this chaos plunges a comet, releasing icy fragments, dust and organics into the primordial seas. The molecules mix with volcanic vents, lightning, tides. Somewhere in some shallow pool, the first fragile chains of RNA spark to life. Not aliens in silver suits, not miracle lightning bolts, but simple molecules delivered by wandering ice. Atlas or something like it. Could have been the courier. But don't get carried away. Panspermia has skeptics too. Critics point out that space is harsh. Radiation shreds molecules, collisions obliterate comets, and most organic compounds don't survive long journeys. Historians still argue whether comets could realistically protect life's seeds across light years. The debate feels endless, swinging between definitely possible and not a chance. Yet the fact remains, you find organics in comets today, the chemistry is there. Whether biology ever followed is still the great unknown. There's also the philosophical twist. If panspermia is true, then life on Earth isn't unique. It's part of a chain reaction seeded across the galaxy. That means you're not the center of creation. You're one blossom in a field of countless others. Every interstellar comet like Atlas might carry another handful of seeds, spreading possibilities you'll never see. That's humbling, but also oddly reassuring. You're not an accident in isolation. You're part of a galactic experiment. Here's a quirky angle to lighten the mood. If panspermia is real, then technically everyone on Earth shares an interstellar family tree. You, me, your annoying neighbour, the one cousin who still posts minion memes, we're all related through cosmic pollen. Next Thanksgiving, you can lean over the mashed potatoes and whisper, "Pass the gravy, fellow child of comet slime." Imagine the looks you'd get. Still, the science doesn't stop at theory. Researchers have tested how microbes handle space travel. Some hardy bacteria survive years on the International Space Station, clinging stubbornly to surfaces exposed to radiation and vacuum. Tardigrades, the microscopic water bears, have even survived direct exposure to space, floating in the void like tiny interstellar hitchhikers. If microbes can endure that, it's not impossible they could endure the icy, shielded interior of a comet. Historians still argue whether such survival is common or freakishly rare, but the possibility alone keeps panspermia alive as a respectable hypothesis. The thought tickles your brain. Maybe somewhere right now a comet is delivering molecules to a young planet orbiting another star. Maybe 1 billion years from now, that planet will sprout forests, oceans, cities. Creatures will evolve, build telescopes, and one evening they'll notice a faint interstellar visitor streaking by. And they'll wonder, just as you do now, whether their DNA was carried there by a comet. It's a loop, a mirror. The story repeats across the galaxy endlessly. And yet the story also makes you feel small, because if life is common, seeded across stars, then humanity is nothing special. Atlas isn't here to check on you. It's just passing by one of countless couriers. Your existence becomes both miraculous and ordinary. Miraculous because molecules became you. Ordinary because molecules may be becoming someone else right now, light years away. That paradox hums in your chest like a lullaby. Here's a historical reminder to ground you. In 1969, the Murchison meteorite fell in Australia, breaking apart into pieces scientists could study. Inside, they found over 70 different amino acids, many not found in Earth biology. Historians still argue whether those molecules formed in space or during the meteor's fall. But the point is clear. Rocks from beyond Earth can and do carry organics. The seeds are real. Whether they sprout is another question. Quirky image time, imagine Atlas as a cosmic delivery driver. It's got a cooler full of frozen molecules in the trunk, is running late by a few million years, and it doesn't even stop to knock. It just tosses the package at Earth's doorstep and speeds away. You never get to thank it. But without that delivery, you wouldn't even exist to complain about shipping times. And so you lie there, tucked into your blanket, marveling at the absurd intimacy of it. A comet from another star may never hit you, may never destroy you, but it could already be inside you, in your DNA, your cells, your thoughts. Maybe you're not just human. Maybe you're the galaxy dreaming of itself, arranged in proteins and whispers. Your eyelids grow heavy at the thought. Comets stop being intruders or omens or doombringers. They become midwives, carrying the fragile chemistry of beginnings across impossible distances. And as Atlas streaks away, indifferent and unstoppable, you drift into sleep with the quiet suspicion that you owe your very existence to something just like it. The thought of comet dust mingling with DNA lingers in your chest, but then your mind flips to the simplest, most deceptive detail of all. Ice. You've seen comets described as dirty snowballs, which sounds almost cute, like something you'd lob across a winter yard. But the truth is far stranger. Comet ice isn't just ice the way water in your freezer is ice. It's a cocktail of frozen chaos, volatile chemicals, strange textures, and mysteries hiding in every frosty layer. You imagine cracking open a chunk of 3i Atlas. At first, sure, it looks like frozen water, crystalline and familiar. But then you notice the smell, sharp, acrid, chemical. That's because comet ice isn't just H2O. It can hold frozen carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia, even hydrogen cyanide. It's less like a snow cone and more like a freezer burn experiment gone rogue. You wouldn't sprinkle this on shaved ice at the county fair unless your goal was mass poisoning. Here's your historical anchor. Back in 1950, astronomer Fred Whipple proposed the dirty snowball model of comets, suggesting they were icy bodies mixed with dust and organics. Historians still argue whether his phrase oversimplified things, but his idea stuck. And over time, spacecraft like Giotto, which flew past Halley's Comet in 1986, confirmed the peg. Yes, comets are icy, dusty, messy conglomerates, but the chemistry turned out to be even stranger than anyone expected. Quirky tidbit time. In 2016, the Rosetta mission studying Comet 67P detected molecular oxygen, O2 locked inside the ice. That shocked scientists because oxygen is so reactive it usually binds with other elements. Finding it free-floating in a comet suggested either very ancient origins or strange preservation processes. Some researchers even joked that the comet smelled like rotten eggs, ammonia and alcohol all at once. Imagine trying to bottle that as a perfume. Eau de Comet. Smells like the end of the world. So when you think of Atlas, don't picture a ball of pure water. Picture a layered popsicle, frozen over billions of years, stuffed with weird chemicals from another star system. Inside could be alcohols, sugars, maybe even precursors to amino acids. Each icy grain is like a time capsule sealed when its home star was young. To study it is to crack open a chemical diary billions of years old. The chemistry matters because ice drives the comet's behaviour. As it swings near the sun, those ices heat up, vaporise and burst outward. That's what makes the glowing coma and the sweeping tail, gas jets shooting into space, dragging dust along. From far away it looks delicate, almost ghostly. Up close it's violent. Geysers of gas exploding from cracks, pushing the comet around unpredictably. Historians still argue whether these jets alone explain the strange motions of Oumuamua, or if something even weirder was at play. Imagine standing on Atlas's surface during one of these outbursts. The ground beneath you would creak, fissures splitting open, crystals turning instantly into vapour, plumes erupting silently into the void. You wouldn't hear it, but you'd feel the vibration, like standing near a sleeping giant who suddenly shifts. and all around you the stars would remain cold and steady, unmoved by the drama. There's another layer to this icy mystery. Comets often trap bubbles of gas inside. When they heat, those bubbles release suddenly, causing mini explosions that alter the comet's spin. That means predicting their paths is harder than it looks. Astronomers can map orbits with precision, but outgassing acts like random rocket thrusters, nudging comets unpredictably. Atlas is too distant for us to watch every puff, but the principle is the same. Its ice doesn't just sit there, it acts, it breathes. Here's your quirky image. Some comets have so much carbon monoxide in their ice that they could technically run a barbecue, though it would kill you before it cooked your burger. Others carry methanol, wood alcohol, which is poisonous to drink but burns nicely. So in a strange way, comets are cosmic liquor cabinets. Dangerous, yes, but stocked with the ingredients for fire, intoxication, and maybe even a very illegal cocktail. If humanity ever tries comet mixology, please don't sign up. The deeper mystery is what Atlas's ice says about its birthplace. Stars forge elements in different ratios, and planetary systems inherit those quirks. That means the ice in Atlas may carry a chemical accent, a unique fingerprint of its home star. Studying it would be like hearing an alien dialect, spoken not in words but in frozen molecules. Historians still argue whether we'll ever collect interstellar samples directly, or if we'll forever squint at them from a distance, longing for a taste we can't have. And then there's the philosophical edge. Ice seems fragile, something that melts in your hand, but in comets it's eternal. Locked away from stars, it endures for billions of years, older than humanity, older than Earth's continents. You sip your water glass tonight without realizing you're part of that same cycle. Frozen hydrogen and oxygen atoms recycled through stars, planets, and maybe comets like Atlas. The glass in your hand is a descendant of cosmic ice. Here's another historical note. In 1986, when the Giotto probe flew past Halley's Comet, it got blasted by dust grains and nearly lost control. Yet it managed to capture the first close-up images of a comet's nucleus, dark, icy, streaked with jets. Historians still argue whether Giotto's data reshaped our understanding more than any single comet mission since, but it proved Whipple right. Comets are dirty, irregular, and absolutely not just pretty streaks in the sky. They're active, complex, and chemical laboratories on the move. Quirky aside, some scientists suspect comets even trap noble gases like argon or xenon. If so, they could hold clues about the early atmospheres of planets, even ones we'll never see. Imagine Atlas, carrying bottled air from its original star system, sealed samples of alien weather, droning across light years. It's like stumbling upon an old perfume bottle in your grandmother's attic, except this one smells like another sun. You can't help but smile at the thought. Ice as messenger, ice as archivist, ice as troublemaker. Atlas isn't just frozen water, it's a frozen story, still legible to anyone patient enough to read it. And as your body sinks deeper into the mattress, you feel the metaphor land. You too are layered like comet ice. Frozen histories, chemical traces, hidden fractures, and moments of sudden eruption. On the surface, you look calm, but inside you're full of secrets waiting for the right warmth to emerge. Maybe that's why comets feel so relatable. They're not tidy spheres, they're messy, volatile, complicated, just like you. So you let the thought settle. Atlas isn't just ice. It's a frozen time capsule, a chemical library, a mirror. And as it drifts past, silently shedding its strange breath into the solar wind, you drift closer to sleep, carrying the same molecules in your veins that comets have carried for eons. The strange chemistry of comet ice lingers in your imagination, but soon you're wondering about something even closer to home. If these frosty wanderers carry all that volatile material, what happens when Earth gets too close to their path? Not just in a Hollywood disasterware, but in the subtler, longer rhythms of climate and history. Because comets don't have to smash directly into Earth to leave fingerprints. Sometimes just dusting the planet is enough. You picture the atmosphere as a fragile glass dome, thin as tissue paper on a cosmic scale. Into that dome, a comet occasionally sneezes dust and gas. The particles drift, scatter sunlight, and linger. Depending on how much is dropped, the effect can be beautiful, glittering meteor showers, or catastrophic, shading the sun and chilling the planet. The idea that comets might steer Earth's climate has hovered at the edges of science for centuries, half fact, half speculation. Here's a historical hook. In 1816, Europe and North America shivered through the year without a summer. Crops failed, frostbite in June, and people starved. Historians still argue whether volcanic eruptions, most notably Mount Tambora in 1815, were the only cause, or if cosmic dust played a role. Some fringe theorists at the time blamed comets, claiming the skies had been poisoned. While the volcanic explanation holds more weight today, the event shows how eager humans are to connect the dots between sky and soil. Quirky tidbit. In 1883, astronomer José Bonilla in Mexico claimed to see hundreds of comet fragments passing in front of the sun. Later interpretations suggested he may have witnessed a near miss with Earth, chunks of debris brushing our orbit. If true, the planet dodged a disaster that could have altered climate worldwide. Historians still argue over what Bonilla actually saw: comet fragments, flocks of birds, or photographic artifacts. But the idea of a near-catastrophic brush with icy rubble is enough to make you shiver. You let yourself imagine a true cometary impact, not just dust. A large chunk slamming into the oceans would vaporize water, fling salt into the atmosphere, and drape the planet in reflective haze. Global temperatures would drop, photosynthesis would falter, harvests would collapse. The dinosaurs, of course, knew this story all too well. Though their culprit was more likely an asteroid, the boundary between the two gets fuzzy. Either way, space rocks and climate disasters are old companions, and it's not always about cold. Some theorists suggest comet impacts can spark wildfires across continents, releasing carbon dioxide and methane that warm the planet afterward. Historians still argue whether events like the Younger Dryas cooling period, roughly 1,200 years ago, were triggered by comet impacts or by purely terrestrial changes. The debate rages in papers and conferences, fueled by tantalizing evidence of microscopic impact spherules and sudden climate swings. Whether true or not, the possibility keeps comets firmly in the climate suspect lineup. Here's where the imagination wanders. Comets as cosmic thermostats. Too many dust grains and you get an ice age. Too many fires and you tip into warmth. Earth delicate and moody, responding to invisible debris from visitors like Atlas. You can almost hear the comet muttering, "Don't mind me, just adjusting your thermostat by a few degrees for the next millennium." It's funny until you realise how vulnerable human civilization really is to those small shifts. Another historical moment. In 1910, when Halley's Comet returned, Earth passed through the part of its tail. Astronomers reassured the public it was harmless, but newspapers fueled panic, warning that cyanogen gas might poison the air. Some people sealed their homes, others bought gas or masks. Historians still argue whether any measurable effect actually touched Earth's climate during that pass, but the collective shiver shows how deeply people link comets with atmospheric doom. Your quirky thought tonight: what if comets are like clumsy house guests who track mud onto the carpet? They don't mean to, but their trails leave stains. Sometimes the stain is faint, like a glittery meteor shower. Sometimes it's a big muddy mess that takes centuries to clean up. Either way, Earth's atmosphere is the carpet, and humanity is the poor tenant left to deal with it. The unsettling part is how little control you have. You can't sweep the skies. You can't close the windows of the atmosphere. If a comet decides to dust Earth, you take what you get. It's the same helplessness your ancestors felt, though now you dress it in scientific vocabulary instead of superstition. The fear hasn't vanished. It's just rebranded. And yet comets may also have saved you. Some models suggest that during Earth's early history, impacts from icy bodies delivered not just water, but also the volatiles needed for a stable atmosphere. Without those frosty deliveries, the planet might have stayed barren. In that sense, comets shaped not just the climate, but the very habitability of Earth. They weren't just intruders, they were architects. Historians still argue whether Earth's oceans came primarily from comets or from volcanic outgassing, but the thought remains intoxicating. You breathe because of ancient comet chemistry. Quirky science fact. Some researchers studying micrometeorites in Antarctica found traces of exotic isotopes, stuff not common on Earth, suggesting cometary or meteoritic origins. Imagine a snowflake falling, carrying within it a story from another star system, a chemical twist that might nudge climate in the tiny, imperceptible ways. If nothing else, it proves that Earth's air and water are constantly spiced by outside hands. So what about Atlas? Its past is too distant to dust Earth directly, but its significance lies in the reminder interstellar comets exist. If one wanders a little closer next time, its fragments could mingle with the atmosphere, shift the climate, and rewrite human history. You're not living in a closed system, you're living in an open experiment, and the cosmos has a habit of poking at the controls, and maybe that's what soothes you paradoxically. Because if climate can be swayed by comets, then you're part of a much bigger story, one that stretches beyond human politics, beyond your personal worries, beyond even the lifetime of civilizations. Earth's climate has always been at the mercy of cosmic whims. You, wrapped in a blanket, are just the latest witness to that dance. The thought makes you softer, quieter. Comets aren't villains or heroes, they're reminders. Reminders that stability is fragile, that change is inevitable, that life persists anyway. You close your eyes and picture Atlas far away, shedding its icy breath into the void. Somewhere in that trail could be dust that centuries from now brushes Earth and adds another invisible thread to your climate's tapestry. And with that thought, your own inner weather settles. The room feels cooler, the air still. You drift like comet dust yourself, suspended between fire and ice, waiting for the warmth of morning to return. You've been wandering through thoughts of dust and climate, but the next thought that drifts into your head is much less romantic: money. Humanity has a habit of turning every mystery into a business plan, and comets are no exception. If ancient people saw omens in the sky, modern people see dollar signs. The glittering tail of Atlas may look ethereal from Earth, but to some it just screams potential investment opportunity. The economics of the sky is a strange, almost absurd world. You picture a group of investors in sleek offices, sipping overpriced coffee while pointing at a PowerPoint slide of a glowing comet. One of them says, "What if we mine that?" And suddenly the dream of cosmic commerce is alive. The fact that the comet is racing through space at tens of kilometers per second doesn't matter. In the world of markets, physics is just a detail to be solved later. Here's your historical anchor. In 1849, during the California gold rush, prospectors flooded the West chasing glitter in the dirt. Historians still argue whether the real wealth went to the miners themselves or to the merchants who sold them picks and shovels, but the frenzy was real. Now imagine that same gold rush impulse projected upward. Instead of hillsides, it's comets and asteroids. Instead of picks, it's rockets. The psychology hasn't changed, only the altitude. Quirky tidbit: NASA once valued a single metal-rich asteroid, 16 Psyche, at around $10 quintillion in raw materials, more than the entire global economy. Of course, that's theoretical. Mining and transporting those metals is science fiction for now. But headlines about trillion-dollar asteroids pop up regularly, and comets get swept into the hype. They might not carry platinum veins, but they carry water ice, and in space, water is liquid gold. Split into hydrogen and oxygen, comet ice could refuel spacecraft, build habitats, and sustain colonies. For investors dreaming of Mars, that's fortune. The irony is that humanity hasn't even mastered recycling plastic bottles, but some are already calculating profits from celestial water. You laugh, but then again, it's inevitable. Capitalism has a way of expanding into every available frontier. Why wouldn't it reach the stars? Of course, not everyone's thinking of profits. Governments invest in comet studies for defense. If an object ever threatened Earth, knowing its composition would help design a deflection strategy. That's where your tax money comes in, funding telescopes, tracking surveys, spacecraft missions, all so that humanity doesn't get blindsided by a rogue rock. You may not remember approving that line item in the budget, but every time you pay taxes, a sliver of your money goes to staring at the sky. A celestial subscription service you never asked for. Here's another historical note. In 1994, the world watched Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 slam into Jupiter in a series of fire explosions. The images shocked people into realizing that planetary impacts aren't just abstract possibilities. Historians still argue whether that moment directly shifted government funding priorities, but it undeniably fueled the push for near-Earth object surveys. Seeing Jupiter pummeled was like watching your neighbour's house catch fire. It made you rethink your own smoke detectors. Quirky aside, in 2012, a company called Planetary Resources announced plans to mine asteroids. Backed by high-profile investors, the vision was dazzling. Robotic prospectors, orbital refineries, a new gold rush in space. A few years later, the company quietly pivoted into selling satellites for Earth imaging. Mining asteroids, it turns out, is harder than pitching slides to billionaires, but the dream persists, especially for comets, which offer ready-made chunks of ice. Investors may have short attention spans, but comets are patient. You can't help but chuckle at the mismatch. On one side, a wandering interstellar object that's existed for billions of years, indifferent to everything. On the other, humans frantically trying to monetize it before quarterly earnings calls. Atlas doesn't care about your markets, your portfolios, or your retirement plans. It just drifts by. And yet here you are listening to bedtime economics, because somewhere, someone's accountant is already running numbers. There's also the darker side of economics. Scarcity breeds conflict. If comets truly are valuable, who gets to claim them? Nations? Corporations? Billionaires with rockets and Twitter accounts? The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 technically says no one can own celestial bodies, but loopholes abound. Historians still argue whether that treaty will hold in the face of serious money. After all, treaties are only as strong as the people willing to enforce them. And enforcement is tricky when the territory is millions of kilometers away. Picture the headlines: corporate war over comet rights. One company sends probes, another sues, politicians argue. Meanwhile, the comet itself shrugs. If a chunk of frozen ice could shrug and keep sailing, humanity is left bickering over ownership of something that was never yours to begin with. Here's a quirky image to lull you. In some speculative futures, comets could be turned into travelling gas stations. Imagine robotic tugs capturing a comet, melting its ice, and setting up refueling depots for spacecraft. You could have an entire interplanetary highway built on the backs of comets, like convenience stores sprinkled across the solar system. The first Comet 711 might open sooner than you think. Bring your loyalty card. And then there's the irony of perspective. To astronomers, Atlas is priceless, not in money, but in knowledge. A rare interstellar sample, a chance to peek into another star system's chemistry. You can't buy that in any market. Yet to the public, the value only registers if you slap a dollar figure on it. People want to know, how much is it worth? That mindset misses the point entirely, but it's also inevitable. Humans crave numbers even when the true value is wonder. Your mind drifts now to the tension between cost and curiosity. Every telescope, every mission, every sleepless astronomer costs money. And in a world with hunger, poverty, and politics, it's fair to ask, is chasing comets worth it? Historians still argue whether space spending is indulgent or essential. Yet you realize lying here that without it, you'd never even know Atlas existed. The economics of survival, yes, but also the economics of meaning. Because in the end, it's not just about mining ice or protecting Earth. It's about investing in awe. About paying for humanity's right to look up, to wonder, to be reminded that you're part of something larger than spreadsheets. That's not a return you can measure in profit margins, but it's real. And so you let the numbers fade. Trillions, quintillions, treaties, taxes, they blur into background hum. Above them all, Atlas keeps moving, utterly untouched by human schemes. A reminder that money is just a story humans tell each other, while comets write their stories in ice and silence. You close your eyes, comforted by the thought that some things remain unbought, unclaimed, unpriced. Atlas doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to the cosmos. And tonight, it belongs to your dreams. The talk of money fades, spreadsheets dissolving like mist, and what lingers instead are questions. Because for every investor calculating profits, there's a philosopher staring upward, trying to wrestle meaning from a streak in the sky. Comets like Atlas don't just tempt miners and astronomers, they provoke thinkers, dreamers, and warriors. You can't watch a star fall or a comet glide without asking yourself what it means to live under such a sky. You imagine some Greek philosopher, robes fluttering, tilting his head back to watch a comet blaze. Maybe it was Aristotle, who believed comets were atmospheric phenomena, exhalations burning in the upper air. To him, they weren't celestial objects at all, just local hiccups. Historians still argue whether his interpretation was purely observational or shaped by his broader cosmology, but the point is clear. Even the sharpest minds of antiquity struggled with comets. They didn't just catalogue them, they tried to fold them into the story of existence. Fast forward centuries, and you find philosophers still tangled in the same sky. Blaise Pascal once wrote about the terrifying vastness of the universe, about the eternal silence of infinite spaces. Comets only amplify that silence. They remind you that the universe is not built for comfort, it is built for indifference. Pascal saw the chill of infinity and shivered. You, lying here, feel the echo. Atlas doesn't care whether you find meaning in it, and that paradoxically gives it meaning. Here's your quirky tidbit. Immanuel Kant, before becoming the poster child of dense moral philosophy, wrote about comets. In his early work, he speculated that comets might refresh planetary atmospheres, delivering volatile materials and keeping worlds habitable. Philosophers, it turns out, sometimes moonlight as amateur astrophysicists. Historians still argue whether Kant's comet ideas influenced his later philosophy of nature, but it's fun to imagine him scribbling notes about icy wanderers while planning his next treatise on duty and reason. For philosophers, comets raise the same perennial questions: fate or chance, purpose or accident. If a comet destroys a civilization, is that destiny or just bad luck? And if a comet delivers life's ingredients, does that make the universe purposeful or just generous in its chaos? You find yourself spinning in those same circles, or was Atlas flung from its home system as part of some grand design? Or was it just another rock knocked loose by gravity's careless shuffle? Think about the word omen. Ancient people saw comets as omens of change, death, war. Philosophers today wouldn't use the word omen, but they still ask, what does this mean for us? Not in a mystical sense, but in a reflective one. What does it say about human existence that icy relics wander through, reminding us of fragility? Perhaps the meaning is simple, that you are not the centre of the cosmos, and you must find value in being a small part of something vast. Here's a historical anchor. In 1680, the Great Comet blazed across European skies so brightly it could be seen during the day. The philosopher Pierre Bayle wrote essays about it, questioning superstition and pointing out that comets need not signify doom. Historians still argue whether his writings mark the turning point between religious fear and rational inquiry, but his voice mattered. Comets could be studied, not just feared. Philosophy in that moment leaned towards science, yet the tension never disappears. Even today, philosophers wrestle with cosmic visitors. Existentialists see comets as metaphors for absurdity, meaningless events in an indifferent universe. Spiritual thinkers see them as reminders of connection, unity, the dance of creation. Pragmatists might say it means nothing unless it affects us, so stop worrying and finish your coffee. And you, somewhere in between, drift between awe and apathy, wondering whether meaning is something comets give or something you give to them. Here's your quirky image. Imagine a modern philosophy seminar where Atlas is the guest of honour. Nietzsche insists it proves the chaos of existence. Camus calls it absurd but beautiful. A Zen monk simply bows and says, "It passes." And all the while, Atlas itself keeps sliding silently by, uninterested in being footnoted. Philosophy debates meaning while the comet embodies it or ignores it. And maybe that's the real lesson. Comets are reminders of humility. They arrive, they astonish, they vanish. They don't explain themselves. They don't apologize, they just move, leaving humans to fill the silence with theories, essays, and series. The falling star doesn't answer your questions, it hands them back to you, glowing unwrapped. Here's a more playful historical aside. In the 17th century, the English philosopher Thomas Burnet speculated that comets might supply fuel for the sun. He imagined them plunging in occasionally to stoke the fire, like cosmic coal deliveries. Historians still argue whether he was dead serious or just theorizing wildly, but the idea captures something endearing. Philosophers trying to make comets fit into their grand systems, even if the fit was awkward. You realize that comets, for philosophers, serve the same role dreams do for psychologists. They're Rorschach tests. Whatever you fear, whatever you value, you can project onto them. They're cosmic ink blots streaking across the night. For one person, a symbol of mortality. For another, a sign of possibility. For a third, just a distraction from grading papers. The comet itself doesn't change, only your reflection does. So what does Atlas mean for you? Maybe it whispers that everything is fleeting and that's okay. Maybe it suggests that destruction and creation are two sides of the same icy coin. Maybe it tells you that even if life is fragile, it's also widespread, seeded in unexpected places. Or maybe it doesn't say anything at all, and you're the one doing the talking. Either way, philosophy insists on asking. You stare at the ceiling, eyelids heavy, and imagine Atlas gliding above, the philosophers of history squabbling below, some terrified, some inspired, all of them united by one truth: the comet comes whether you're ready or not. It doesn't wait for your conclusions, it simply passes, leaving you to wrestle with the questions it stirs. And in that way, Atlas becomes less a comet and more a mirror. A reminder not of what the universe is, but of what you are. Fragile, thoughtful, restless, always hungry for meaning. You drift with that thought, softer, slower, until the questions themselves dissolve into silence, like a comet tail, fading into the dawn. The philosophers have had their say, scribbling essays and muttering about absurdity, but you know they're not the only ones watching the sky. Religion has always had a special claim on comets, and Atlas is no different. Every bright visitor invites prophets, preachers, skeptics, and opportunists to step forward, waving their interpretations like banners. A streak in the heavens is an open stage, and faith never turns down a performance. You imagine it, the moment news of Three-Eye Atlas trickled through the media, somewhere a pastor, imam, rabbi, or guru leaned over their pulpit or live stream and said, "Ah, yes, a sign." What kind of sign depends entirely on the audience. To some, a comet is divine warning, an urgent reminder of judgment. To others, it's proof of God's creativity, painting the skies with wonders. For still others, it's simply another reminder of the mystery that faith already celebrates. Here's your historical anchor. In 1456, when Halley's Comet burned above Europe, Pope Calixtus III supposedly declared special prayers against its influence, treating it as an omen of doom. Historians still argue whether he really excommunicated the comet, or if later writers exaggerated the story, but the detail stuck. A comet framed as a spiritual adversary. And isn't that just so human? A ball of ice and dust streaks by, and we give it a role in the eternal drama of heaven and hell. Quirky tidbit: in 1910, when Halley's Comet returned, some opportunists in America sold comet insurance, promising payouts if the comet killed you. Others marketed special tonics or gas masks, blessed, to protect against the cyanogen gas rumoured to lurk in its tail. Religion and commerce fused in a carnival of fear. You can laugh now, but scroll through the internet during Atlas's approach and you'll see echoes. Modern prophets streaming end-time sermons, hashtags declaring cosmic judgment, and skeptics rolling their eyes. Different technology, same impulse. Every faith tradition has had its comet moment. In Chinese records, comets were broom stars, sweeping away dynasties. In Mesoamerica, they were fiery serpents, heralds of upheaval. In Islam's early centuries, scholars carefully recorded comet appearances, slotting them into the vast catalogue of heavenly signs. For Hindus, the word Dhumketu means smoke banner, a celestial portent tied to karma and cosmic cycles. Everywhere, across centuries, comets slide into scripture, myth, and ritual. They are too dramatic to ignore, too rare to dismiss. You picture Atlas passing today, and the responses lining up like an interfaith council. One preacher declares it's a warning about moral decay. Another says it's proof that the universe was designed because beauty like this couldn't come from chance. A skeptic posts that it's just a rock, nothing mystical at all, and in the comments someone accuses NASA of hiding the truth. The comet itself, indifferent, just keeps glowing faintly in the dark. Here's another historical moment to anchor your thoughts. In 1066, Halley's Comet appeared just before the Battle of Hastings. Both sides saw it as a sign, doom for one, destiny for the other. Historians still argue whether anyone considered it a neutral event, but the tapestry woven afterwards stitched the comet right above King Harold's head, as if heaven itself had chosen sides. Religious and political meaning fused into embroidery. 1,000 years later, the same impulse lingers. Whatever story you're already telling, the comet will be cast as supporting character. And here's your quirky image. Imagine comets as stage lights. When one appears, everyone below scrambles to adjust their script. Religions rush to claim it proves their worldview, skeptics shout that it proves nothing at all, and somewhere someone starts a cult. It's inevitable. Humans can't resist assigning cosmic meaning to glowing strangers in the sky. Indeed, comets and cults go hand in hand. Think of Heaven's Gate in 1997, whose followers believed a spacecraft trailed behind Comet Hale-Bopp. Their tragic end still hangs in cultural memory, proof of how powerfully comets can fuse with belief. Atlas didn't trigger anything so dramatic, but smaller ripples did appear, corners of the internet buzzing with whispers of prophecy, of messages from beyond. Historians still argue whether new religions are born more from desperation or from genuine awe, but comets seem to offer fertile ground for both. And yet, there's also gentleness in religious reactions. For many, a comet is simply a reminder to look up, to marvel at creation, to pray with gratitude. Not doom, not judgment, just wonder sanctified. You can imagine a child tugging at a parent's sleeve during a nighttime viewing, the parent whispering, "See, that's God's paintbrush." Science might say frozen gases, but the feeling is the same, or turned sacred. Of course, skeptics laugh. They point out the absurdity of claiming a rock flung across space is divine commentary on human behaviour. Why would a comet, birthed in another star system billions of years ago, appear precisely to send a message about your political squabbles? The timing doesn't add up. And yet humans are story-hungry creatures. If the universe offers spectacle, you weave it into your narrative. Even skeptics do it. Just in reverse, using comets to argue for randomness instead of purpose. Either way, the sky becomes a sermon. Here's a quirky thought for your pillow tonight. If aliens exist and watch Earth, maybe they roll their many eyes every time humans interpret comets as personal messages. Really? They'd say. It's just physics. Stop making everything about you. But then again, maybe they'd understand. Maybe they too tell comet stories, myths of their own, stitched into alien scriptures you'll never read. Perhaps comets provoke faith everywhere, not just here, and that thought comforts you, because whether Atlas is omen or accident, miracle or math, it has already united billions under one roof. The sky. Some respond with prayers, some with skepticism, some with memes, some with silence. All are participating in the oldest ritual humanity knows, looking up. You close your eyes and imagine the comet streaking above churches, mosques, temples, meditation halls. Different words, different songs, but all eyes tilted upward to the same glowing smudge. Maybe that's the truest religious reaction of all, not fear, not dogma, but shared attention, a brief, fragile unity under the wandering light. After prophets and preachers finish weaving their comet stories, another group takes the stage, artists. Because comets don't just belong to scientists or theologians, they belong to anyone with a brush, a pen, a camera, or a melody. Three-Eye Atlas may never make the cover of a tabloid again, but in some quiet studio, someone is already sketching its faint tail, trying to catch the shimmer of interstellar breath on paper. Humans have always painted the sky. Cave walls bear constellations scratched in ochre. Ancient manuscripts glow with diagrams of stars, and comets, of course, make cameos in both. One of the earliest depictions comes from 12th century Japan, where a painted scroll shows a comet streaking like a divine brushstroke across a battlefield scene. Historians still argue whether the artist intended it as literal observation or as a metaphor for chaos, but either way, the streak became art. Quirky tidbit: in 1301, Giotto painted the Adoration of the Magi and included a comet above the nativity scene. Legend has it he was inspired by Halley's Comet, which had appeared just a few years earlier. Ever since, artists have often used comets to symbolize revelation, divine messages, or sudden inspiration. Imagine a celestial snowball turned into the Star of Bethlehem, immortalized in tempera paint. That's quite the glow-up. You fast forward to the Romantic era when poets couldn't resist waxing lyrical about falling stars and blazing comets. They weren't thinking about carbon monoxide jets or cyanogen gases. They were thinking about destiny, mortality, passion. Lord Byron called comets terrible beacons, while others saw them as symbols of fleeting beauty. Historians still argue whether these poets genuinely feared comets or just used them as convenient metaphors for their brooding vibes. Either way, the comet became muse, and then, of course, cinema arrived. Comets turned into disaster fodder, Hollywood's favourite cosmic antagonist. Deep Impact, Armageddon, countless B-movies. The comet is always on a collision course, always threatening to wipe out humanity unless Bruce Willis or a plucky teen scientist saves the day. You laugh, but those films are modern myths, dramatising the same awe and dread your ancestors embroidered in tapestries. The special effects are flashier. The impulse is the same. Here's your quirky image. If Atlas had its own agent, It would be furious about its casting choices. Why am I always the villain? It would protest. I'm just passing through. Couldn't I be cast as a misunderstood drifter, or maybe a romantic lead? But Hollywood likes drama, not nuance, so comets are doomed to play monsters. Poor Atlas, forever typecast. Outside blockbusters, though, comets inspire quieter art. Painters capture the arc of light against a night sky. Photographers brave cold mornings to snap long exposures of faint tails. Musicians write pieces with titles like Celestial Visitor or Song of the Comet, layering strings to mimic the drift of dust across stars. Even memes, yes, memes, are a kind of folk art, turning comets into jokes that spread faster than tales across a digital canvas. Here's a historical anchor for your gallery. In 1577, a brilliant comet appeared, observed by Tycho Brahe. Not only did he measure it scientifically, proving it lay beyond Earth's atmosphere, but artists of the time also painted it in woodcuts and broadsheets. Historians still argue whether those images were meant as art or journalism, but they show how comets straddle both worlds: data and depiction, measurement and metaphor. You picture a modern artist hunched over their easel trying to capture Atlas. They know the photo will look like a faint smudge, so they exaggerate. Longer tails, brighter cores, a shimmer of alien mystery. Accuracy isn't the point. Emotion is. The comet becomes what the artist felt, not what the telescope saw. Maybe that's truer in its own way. Quirky aside, comets even show up in fashion. Designers have borrowed their arcs for dresses, jewellery, runway shows. A streak of sequins down a gown. A spray of crystals across a necklace. All echoes of comet tales. Somewhere right now, someone is wearing Atlas without realising it. Glitter trailing from shoulder to hem. Space as couture. The deeper you sink into this thought, the more you realise art is how humanity domesticated comets. Science explains them, religion interprets them, but art makes them intimate. A poem in your pocket, a painting on your wall, a film in your memory, those are ways of bringing the comet down from the unreachable sky Atlas. May never land on your street, but it can live in your bookshelf or playlist. And here's a historical reminder. In the Bayeux Tapestry, Halley's comet wasn't just background, it was narrative. It told viewers, fate has shifted, kings will fall. That's art functioning as both history and prophecy. Historians still argue whether medieval viewers saw it as literal evidence of God's will or just clever embroidery. But either way, the comet became thread. And now, in the 21st century, Atlas could just as easily be stitched into digital art, a pixelated successor to that ancient needlework. You chuckle at the thought of future historians scrolling through today's archives. They'll find not just telescope data, but fan art of comets as anime characters, TikTok dances tagged #Comet Challenge, and movie posters of fictional disasters. They'll scratch their heads and ask, what did this generation really think of comets? Historians still argue about the meaning of ancient petroglyphs. Imagine them debating whether a 2020s meme was reverence, mockery, or both. So you let your imagination wander. You see Atlas painted on cave walls, embroidered in tapestries, sung in hymns, filmed in blockbusters, remixed in memes. The comet itself hasn't changed, only the brushes have. It's the same icy traveller, interpreted again and again by whatever tools humanity holds. That continuity is oddly soothing. You're part of a very long artistic chain, stretching from charcoal on stone to digital pixels, and as your eyelids grow heavier, you realise something simple. Comets inspire because they move, not just across the sky, but across the human mind. They streak, they vanish, they leave trails in memory. Atlas, glowing faintly in its alien ice, is already a painting, a poem, a melody. And tonight it's also this story, curling into your thoughts like a tale of words drifting towards sleep. The artists put their brushes down, the canvases dry, the symphonies fade, and yet the comet is still there, sliding silently across the sky. You'd think everyone would treat such a visitor as a muse, or at least a curiosity, but not every set of eyes looks upward with wonder. Some look upward with suspicion, some with calculation. Somewhere in windowless offices humming with fluorescent light, military analysts are staring at the same object you're daydreaming about. But for them, Atlas isn't a poem, it's a potential threat vector. The military doesn't trust coincidence, a rock the size of a mountain wandering into the solar system. Interesting, potentially useful, definitely something to keep in a file. The official word is that comets are studied for planetary defense. That's the friendly label anyway, the idea of protecting Earth from impacts, designing missions to nudge away dangerous rocks, keeping humanity safe. But beneath that label lurks another thought. Anything powerful enough to save Earth is also powerful enough to weaponize. Here's your historical anchor. In the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union quietly studied asteroids and comets, not for mining or inspiration, but for defense scenarios. Historians still argue whether documents hinting at Project Icarus, a plan to deflect a rogue asteroid with nuclear warheads, were serious or just theoretical exercises. But the mindset is clear. The cosmos wasn't just for exploration, it was another battlefield waiting to open. Quirky tidbit, some conspiracy-minded folks in the 1970s even speculated that comets could be used as natural weapons, nudged by secret technology to crash into enemy nations. Imagine that briefing. Sir, if we can just push this kilometre-wide ice ball a few degrees off course, we can end the war by next century. Ridiculous, absolutely. But it shows how the military imagination sees comets, not as art, not as faith, not even as science, but as leverage. You picture Atlas now not as a glowing visitor, but as a dot on a classified radar screen, filed under objects of interest. Defense agencies track it with the same tools they use for satellites and missiles. They don't care about its tail or its poetry, they care about its trajectory, its mass, its potential energy. To them, Atlas is math with consequences. And there's another layer, the paranoia of secrecy. If astronomers can spot an interstellar visitor, so can intelligence agencies. And if scientists talk publicly about a comet, you can bet some generals are asking, what aren't they saying? What could this really be? Historians still argue whether Oumuamua's strange behaviour in 2017 genuinely stirred military interest as a possible alien probe, but leaked comments suggest the question wasn't limited to university halls. Even the Pentagon, it seems, can't resist playing what if. You let your mind wander into that scenario. Imagine military strategists debating whether Atlas might hide technology, signals, even surveillance potential. They know it's irrational, but they've been trained never to dismiss possibilities. The result? Another line in another classified report filed away under low probability, high consequence. The comet, oblivious, keeps streaking by, unaware it has been drafted into Earth's endless security anxieties. Here's a more grounded historical moment. In 1989, the US military's space surveillance network famously misclassified a small asteroid as a possible incoming missile, sparking a brief moment of panic. Historians still argue about how close that came to a false alarm, but it proves the point. Cosmic objects can be mistaken for weapons, and weapons can be mistaken for cosmic objects. The line between the two is thinner than you'd like. Quirky aside, in the 1990s, when the idea of asteroid mining first caught headlines, some defense analysts joked about denial of space resources becoming a future military objective. In other words, if your enemy wants to mine a comet for fuel, you might want to sabotage their claim. Space piracy, written into hypothetical policy. It sounds absurd, but then again, so did cyber war once upon a time. You can't help but chuckle at the irony. A comet that has drifted peacefully for billions of years suddenly becomes a pawn in human wargames the moment it crosses your neighbourhood. To Atlas, Earth is just a blur in its journey. To Earth, Atlas is another excuse to argue about control, and yet, part of you understands the instinct. Comets carry enormous kinetic energy. If one did wander too close, the devastation could rival the mightiest weapons ever imagined. Of course the military pays attention. Of course they want contingency plans. You might call it paranoia, they call it prudence. Historians still argue whether such preparations are wise foresight or wasted resources, but either way, the watchfulness persists. Think of the language, planetary defense. It sounds noble, almost superheroic. Who wouldn't want to defend the planet? But hidden in the phrase is the reality that defense and offense often blur. A technology capable of moving a comet could be used to aim one. A system designed to monitor impacts could be adapted for surveillance. Every shield is also a potential sword, and the cosmos, for all its grandeur, isn't immune to human dualities. Here's a quirky mental picture for you tonight. Generals in crisp uniforms, sitting around a conference table, staring at an artist's rendering of a comet tail projected on the wall. One clears his throat and says, "Gentlemen, what if the aliens are using it for reconnaissance?" Another scribbles notes, trying not to roll his eyes. Meanwhile, Atlas is 1 billion kilometers away, blissfully ignorant of the meeting. You almost feel sorry for the comet, reduced from cosmic wonder to PowerPoint bullet point. But then, isn't that just human nature? To turn everything into potential threat, potential profit, potential advantage. You see it in history again and again. Fire was warmth until it became a weapon. Airplanes were miracles until they were bombers. Satellites were communication marvels until they were spying platforms. Why should comets escape the pattern? And yet here in the dark the thought softens. Because while some eyes see weapons, others still see wonder. You're reminded that meaning isn't inherent, it's projected. A comet can be art, scripture, resource, or target. It depends on who's watching and what they fear or desire. Atlas, in its icy indifference, becomes a mirror of humanity's contradictions. So you let the image fade. Military maps glowing in war rooms, satellites scanning the skies, files stamped confidential. All of it temporary. Atlas won't remember, won't care, won't change course. It passes by, untouched by human schemes, and you, smaller than any army, feel strangely comforted. Because in the end, the comet belongs not to the generals, not to the investors, not to the artists or the prophets. It belongs to motion, to silence, to time. You close your eyes with that thought, letting the paranoia and the plans dissolve into static. The comet drifts on. The military keeps watch. And you drift into sleep knowing the only battle tonight is between your heavy eyelids and the pull of dreams. The war rooms dim, the classified files close, and now the spotlight turns back toward you. Not your nation, not your religion, not your philosophy, but your own fragile mind. Because comets like Atlas don't just trigger military strategies or theological sermons, they prod at something subtler, the psychology of distant threats, the way you fear things you'll never touch, the way you stress over events that will almost certainly never happen, the way your imagination insists on rehearsing disasters you won't live to see. Starts with perspective. The human brain evolved to dodge lions, not calculate probabilities of interstellar collisions. You're wired to react to sudden rustles in the grass, not icy visitors drifting millions of kilometers away. And yet, when you read a headline about a doomsday comet, your pulse quickens as if danger were right outside your window. That's the mismatch. Primal instincts meeting cosmic scale. Here's a historical anchor for this mismatch. In 1910, when Halley's Comet returned and newspapers spread rumours about its toxic tail, some people in Europe reportedly sealed their homes, stuffed cracks with cloth, and even bought comet antidote pills. Historians still argue whether the panic was as widespread as legend claims, but the psychology is clear. Distant, abstract threats can feel immediate when painted vividly enough. You don't need a lion in your cave. You just need a headline in your hand. Quirky tidbit. Psychologists have a phrase for this: availability heuristic. It means your brain judges the likelihood of events based on how easily you can picture them. Meteor impacts make great movies, so they feel possible. You don't dream about dying from cholesterol buildup because nobody makes blockbusters about slow plaque formation. But a comet smashing Earth? Your brain sees the trailer, not the math. You can test this yourself. Picture a comet streaking down, lighting up the sky, slamming into the ocean with a shockwave taller than skyscrapers. Easy, right? Now picture microscopic air pollution slowly eroding lung tissue over decades. Harder, less cinematic, even though it's vastly more likely. Your brain is biased towards spectacle, and comets feed that bias perfectly. The psychology deepens when you think about scale. Comets are distant, enormous, ancient, concepts the human mind struggles to hold. Your day is measured in minutes, your life in decades. Comets move on million-year arcs. That mismatch creates unease. You feel tiny, powerless, and your mind hates powerlessness. So it fills the gap with worry, even if the worry is misplaced. Here's a historical example of worry over scale. In 97, when Comet Hale-Bopp graced the skies, it triggered not just awe but tragedy. The Heaven's Gate group believed a spacecraft followed the comet and that salvation required leaving Earth behind, permanently. Historians still argue whether the comet was the cause or just the spark for pre-existing beliefs, but the psychology is unmistakable. Distant objects can warp human subsequent fears and hopes into extreme shapes. Quirky aside, even if NASA scientists admit to feeling shivers when they calculate cometary trajectories. They know the math, they know the probabilities, but still, when the line brushes close to Earth's orbit, their stomachs twist. That's psychology overpowering statistics. They aren't panicking, but they're human. Numbers don't erase instincts. And here's where you fit in. You lie in bed, perfectly safe, and yet part of you still asks, what if? That little whisper is what psychologists call catastrophic thinking. Your brain loves rehearsing disaster scenarios, as if practicing them might protect you. Spoiler, it doesn't. But the rehearsal itself feels oddly soothing, like scratching an itch. You imagine the comet hitting, picture the shockwave, then remind yourself it won't happen. Relief floods in. Anxiety creates its own cure. It's not all doom, though. The psychology of distant threats also fuels fascination. You're drawn to danger when it's far enough away to be safe. Roller coasters mimic falling without killing you. Horror movies mimic terror without risk. Comets are the same, a safe taste of apocalypse, visible from your backyard. You watch the streak, feel the dread, then exhale knowing it will miss. It's cosmic catharsis. Here's another historical moment. During the Cold War, schoolchildren in the US practiced duck and cover drills for nuclear strikes. Historians still argue whether these exercises provided real safety or just psychological comfort, but they show the same pattern, preparing for threats you can't actually control. Comets fit neatly into that tradition. You can't stop them, but imagining their impact feels like action. Quirky mental picture. If therapists ran comet support groups, you'd sit in a circle of anxious stargazers, sipping chamomile tea. One person admits they check comet trajectories online at midnight. Another confesses they dream about fiery impacts. The therapist nods and says, totally normal. Let's all practice grounding techniques. Remember, the comet is millions of kilometers away, and you're just a tiny miracle of carbon on a comfy planet. Everyone exhales, laughs nervously, and schedules next week's session. There's also the paradox of proximity. A comet millions of kilometers away feels scary because it's large and dramatic. But a rock the size of a house that could actually hit Earth tomorrow, hardly anyone notices because it wouldn't make a cinematic trailer. Your brain overreacts to spectacle and underreacts to mundane threats. It's like worrying about shark attacks while texting while driving. The irony is that comets can also soothe. For some, gazing at a distant threat paradoxically shrinks earthly problems. Your deadlines, your bills, your awkward email drafts. They feel smaller when compared to a cosmic ice ball flying through the void. The psychology flips. Instead of fueling panic, comets offer perspective. They remind you that your stress is dust compared to the stars. Here's a historical note to tie it in. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic Roman emperor, often wrote about looking at the heavens to put human worries in context. Historians still argue whether he ever saw a comet during his reign, but you can imagine him nodding. Yes, a fiery streak above Rome. And yet the empire still argues about taxes. Stoicism in a nutshell, distant threats teaching you calm. So where does that leave you tonight? Somewhere between anxiety and awe. You fear what you can't control, but you also crave it. You worry about a comet hitting Earth, but you also use that image to comfort yourself, to remind yourself that life is fragile and that fragility makes it precious. Atlas, unknowingly, has become your therapist, your horror movie, your lullaby. And as your eyes grow heavy, you feel the psychology softening. The fear remains, but it's wrapped in distance, padded by probabilities, turned almost playful. The comet is far away, the threat is abstract, and your brain, after spinning through worry, is ready to rest. You let the thought dissolve. Distant threats don't need immediate answers. Sometimes they just need to be acknowledged, sighed at, and then set aside like a bedtime story. You've wrestled with psychology, teased apart fear and awe, but you know there's another layer to the comet story, one that thrives not in labs or churches, but in late-night forums, YouTube comment sections, and whispered conversations over the diner coffee. Where scientists see icy fragments and philosophers see symbols, conspiracy theorists see plots. To them, Three-Eye Atlas isn't just a rock passing through, it's a secret, a cover-up, a cosmic smoking gun. You can already hear the tone, breathless, urgent, peppered with phrases like, what they're not telling you. Somewhere, someone is uploading a video with a thumbnail of Atlas zoomed in and circled in red, glowing arrows pointing to blurry pixels. The title reads, Comet or Alien Craft. NASA lies exposed. Clicks pour in. Comments multiply. The comet has entered the conspiracy machine. Here's a historical anchor. In 1990, Comet Hale-Bopp became the centerpiece of one of the most infamous conspiracy-driven tragedies, when the Heaven's Gate cult believed a spacecraft trailed behind it. Historians still argue whether the cult would have reached the same fate without Hale-Bopp, but the comet undeniably provided the spark. The lesson: whenever a bright visitor crosses the sky, belief systems bloom in its wake, sometimes harmless, sometimes deadly. Quirky tidbit: during Atlas's brief media moment, a few online corners speculated it wasn't a comet at all, but a fragment of Nibiru. The mythical hidden planet conspiracy theorists have been promising for decades. Nibiru has survived more fake end-of-the-world dates than you've had birthdays, but still, it pops up like cosmic whack-a-mole. If a new object appears, someone will shout, "See? Proof? Never mind the orbital math, the vibe is what matters." You pause and consider, why do comets attract conspiracies so easily? Partly it's their strangeness. They appear suddenly, glow oddly, move against the familiar constellations. They're unpredictable enough to feel suspicious, yet distant enough to resist direct inspection. That's prime soil for theories. Add a dash of mistrust in institutions. Stir in a sprinkle of apocalyptic hunger, and you've got a recipe. Conspiracies about comets usually cluster in 3 flavors. First, the cover-up. Authorities supposedly know the comet is heading for Earth but are hiding it to avoid panic. Second, the alien angle. The comet isn't natural but a craft or probe disguised as ice. Third, the spiritual apocalypse, where the comet heralds judgment, ascension, or dimensional shifts. Atlas got servings of all 3, though none stuck around in mainstream news for long. Here's another historical example. In 1910, when Halley's Comet passed, some claimed the cyanogen gas in its tail would suffocate the planet. Snake oil salesmen sold anti-comet pills. Historians still argue whether most people genuinely feared this or just chuckled at the sensationalism, but the episode shows how quickly a comet becomes a marketing hook. Swap pills for podcasts, and the pattern repeats today. Quirky aside, one conspiracy theory about Atlas claimed its disintegration was faked, that NASA simply stopped showing images to cover up its approach. Never mind that amateur astronomers with backyard telescopes also saw the comet fade. To believers, every observation that contradicts the theory becomes part of the conspiracy. It's a self-sealing story, airtight not because it's true but because nothing can puncture it. There's also the comfort angle. For some, conspiracy thinking provides a sense of control. If Atlas is just a random rock, it means the universe is chaotic and indifferent. If Atlas is a secret spaceship, at least the chaos has intention. Someone is driving, even if it's sinister. To a worried brain, a puppet master is easier to accept than pure randomness. Historians still argue whether this instinct fuels most conspiracy thinking, but the comet is a perfect canvas for it. You imagine scrolling late at night, stumbling onto one of those rambling live streams. A voice whispers urgently about cosmic alignments and government suppression. The host claims to have secret footage, probably blurry, probably just lens flares. The chat scrolls frantically with emojis and exclamations, and you, watching, feel the strange tug. What if? Even if you know it's nonsense and part of you enjoys the thrill. Conspiracies are bedtime stories for adults, scary, implausible, but delicious in the telling. Here's another historical anchor. In the 17th century, pamphlets circulated in Europe interpreting comets as signs of God's wrath or evidence of witchcraft. Historians still argue whether people believed them literally or used them as political metaphors, but either way, conspiratorial thinking about comets is nothing new. What once said by hand-copied manuscripts now spreads by hashtags. Different medium, same impulse. Quirky image. If Atlas had a PR team, it would sigh deeply every time someone called it a spaceship. I'm literally ice and dust, it would protest. I've been flying for millions of years. Please stop saying I'm spying on you. But the internet doesn't care about the comet's protests. The internet cares about clicks, and nothing clicks like a conspiracy. You wonder, half amused, half unsettled, how many people went to bed anxious over Atlas? Not because of the comet itself, but because of a video they watched claiming the government was hiding its true path. Their fear was real, even if the threat wasn't. That's the strange power of stories. They can wound you without existing. And yet, conspiracies aren't entirely without charm. They show creativity, imagination, even humour. They reveal how hungry humans are for connection and explanation. If nothing else, they prove that comets like Atlas capture attention far beyond astronomy journals. For better or worse, the icy traveller became a character in humanity's endless drama, so you breathe out, amused and tired. You don't need to solve conspiracies tonight. You don't need to debunk, argue, or convince. You just need to acknowledge the pattern. Comets appear, theories bloom, and then both fade, leaving traces in memory. Atlas moves on. The internet finds a new obsession. The cycle repeats, as predictable as orbits, and with that thought, the whispers fade. The comet returns to silence. The theories dissolve into static. You close your eyes, comforted by the reminder that not every mystery needs an answer, and not every answer needs your worry. Some stories are just noise. The comet, as always, is only passing through. The conspiracies fade like static at the edge of your mind, and what rises in their place is something quieter, heavier, time. Because if comets like Atlas teach you anything, it's that your sense of time is laughably small compared to theirs. You measure hours by clocks, days by calendars, decades by wrinkles on your face. Atlas measures nothing. It simply moves, carrying with it the weight of billions of years. Watching it glide is like looking into a mirror that shows not your reflection, but your irrelevance. Start with the basics. Atlas is an interstellar object, flung from another system. That means it's been travelling for millions, possibly billions of years. While you struggle to plan for next weekend, Atlas has been patiently crossing gulfs so wide they make the speed of light look sluggish. The comet doesn't hurry, it doesn't procrastinate. It just exists in motion, older than your babies, older than the pyramids, older than the oceans themselves. Here's your historical anchor. In the 18th century, the French naturalist Georges-Louis Leclerc, Comte de Buffon, proposed that comets had once struck the sun, throwing off fragments that became planets. Historians still argue whether he meant it literally or metaphorically, but the key is this. Comets have long been tied to the scale of cosmic time, shaping not just years but epochs. Humans guessed, centuries ago, that comets weren't fleeting fireworks but deep-time architects. Quirky tidbit. The oldest written record of a comet may come from Babylonian tablets over 2,500 years old, etched with careful lines marking their appearances. Imagine the patience of those sky watchers, scratching clay with reed pens, preserving a visitor that wouldn't return for centuries. They weren't tracking weather for the week, they were carving cosmic time into stone. You contrast that with your own life. You live on a timeline crowded with appointments, alarms, deadlines. You rush to work, rush through meals, rush to bed, only to scroll restlessly at 2 a.m. Meanwhile, Atlas keeps gliding, unbothered by urgency. Its journey across your sky lasts only weeks, but its actual voyage is eternal, unhurried. It reminds you how absurd your clocks are, little metronomes tapping against infinity. Your mind drifts further. If comets carry time, then every fragment of ice inside Atlas is a fossil. Those molecules froze in place before humanity, before Earth's first forests, maybe even before Earth itself. They are time capsules from another star system's youth. To hold a grain from Atlas would be to hold alien prehistory older than every story ever told on this planet. You can't rush that kind of time, you can only marvel at it. Here's another historical example. In 1705, Edmund Halley calculated that a comet observed repeatedly through history was the same object returning every 76 years. He predicted its return in 1758, long after his own death. Historians still argue whether Halley expected his prediction to succeed or if it was a gamble, but it paid off. The comet returned right on schedule. That calculation forced humanity to reckon with timescales larger than a single lifetime. To see Halley's comet is to join a relay race of generations, grandparents, parents, children, each taking turns to look upward. Quirky aside, Mark Twain was born in 1835, the year of Halley's return, and died in 1910, just as it appeared again. He once joked, "I came in with Halley's comet. It is coming again next year, and I expect to go out with it." He was right. A human lifespan bookended by a comet's orbit, tiny compared to cosmic time, but long enough to feel mythic. You can't help but smile at the neatness of it, even as you realise your own life is a flicker compared to Atlas's voyage. And that's where the psychology shifts. Comets like Atlas don't just teach you about time, they teach you humility. You're not built to grasp millions of years, but you can feel the ache of it. The comet stretches your perspective, pulling your imagination out of your daily grind and forcing you to see your life as a heartbeat in a much larger rhythm. Here's a more modern anchor. In 2014, the European Space Agency's Rosetta mission landed the Philae probe on Comet 67P. Historians still argue whether the technical glitches overshadowed the success, but the symbolism was clear. Humanity had touched a relic billions of years old. Imagine it, steel built in earthly factories resting on ice older than Earth's continents. That's not just a technological feat, it's a handshake across time. Quirky thought, if Atlas had a diary, it would read like geological strata. Year 1 billion, flung from home system. Year 2 billion, past a nameless star. Year 4 billion, grazed the edge of a spiral arm. Year 5 billion, noticed a small blue planet buzzing with nervous creatures. The comet's entries are spread across epochs. Your own entries, bought groceries, answered email, fell asleep watching Netflix, feel embarrassingly brief in comparison. But that's the beauty of it. Comets remind you that time is elastic. You don't need to live for billions of years to matter. Your small window of consciousness is still real, still vivid. The comet is long, but you are intense. You burn bright, even if briefly. Atlas passes through once and will never return. You too pass through once, never to return. You're more comet than you realized. Another historical footnote. Medieval monks sometimes recorded comets in illuminated manuscripts, tucking them into calendars that spanned centuries. They weren't sure when or why the comets would return, but they tried to map time anyway, reaching beyond their short lives. Historians still argue whether those manuscripts were meant as scientific tools or spiritual guides, but either way, they echo the same lesson. To record a comet is to reach for eternity. Quirky aside, modern planners and apps let you schedule events years ahead, but very few let you mark next comet appearance. Imagine if your phone buzzed with reminders like, Halley's Comet returning in 2061, hope you're still around. A cosmic calendar for cosmic patience. As you lie there, you feel yourself soften to the lesson. Time isn't yours to own. It isn't yours to master. It flows, it stretches, it dwarfs you, and yet you belong to it. Atlas isn't teaching you to fear your smallness, it's teaching you to rest in it. To accept that your story is short but woven into a much larger fabric, so you breathe deeply, letting the weight of time press you gently into the mattress. Atlas continues its journey, carrying epochs in its frozen veins. You continue yours, carrying minutes in your warm bloodstream. Both are fleeting, both are infinite in their own way. And as you close your eyes, you realize comets don't just travel through space, they travel through time, and for one brief moment, you traveled with them. Time stretches, folds, and dissolves, and as Atlas drifts farther from sight, your mind latches onto one last thread: legacy. Because if interstellar comets teach you anything, it's that their visits outlast themselves. They streak briefly across human perception, then vanish forever into the dark, leaving behind not their bodies, but their echoes, data, myths, questions, and quiet awe. The comet passes, the comet's story lingers. Start with the scientists. Every telescope aimed at Atlas, every sleepless night of observation, every arc traced on orbital charts, those become part of humanity's permanent archive. Astronomers may never see the comet again, but the measurements will live in journals, waiting for future researchers to compare with other interstellar visitors. Atlas itself will be gone, but its fingerprints will remain in equations. Knowledge is its legacy, written not in stone but in numbers. Here's your historical anchor. Think of Edmund Halley, who died before his namesake comet's return, yet left behind the prediction that proved him right. Historians still argue whether Halley imagined his name would echo through centuries, but his calculations gave him a legacy far beyond his lifetime. Atlas offers a similar echo. Even if no one alive today sees it return, because it never will, its discovery cements humanity's awareness that the cosmos is not closed, that stars send travelers, that interstellar traffic exists. Quirky tidbit. Some astronomers have already speculated that interstellar comets like Atlas might be common, and that future surveys could find dozens every decade. If so, Atlas won't be remembered as a singular marvel but as a pioneer, the awkward first guest at a party that will someday be crowded. Imagine a future textbook. Atlas, one of the first 3 confirmed interstellar objects discovered in 2020s. Its name etched forever in the margins of science, even as the comet itself recedes into anonymity. But legacy isn't just numbers, it's stories. The artists who paint its tale, the poets who write of its passage, the conspiracy theorists who spin it into myth, the preachers who use it as sermon material, all of them give Atlas a second life. In that sense, comets don't just belong to astronomers. They belong to culture. Long after the last telescope log is archived, someone will stumble across a poem or a meme or a mural, and their Atlas will be again, glowing faintly on Earth. Another historical echo, Halley's Comet stitched into the Bayeux tapestry, forever tied to the Norman conquest. Historians still argue whether the embroiderers saw it as doom or destiny, but either way, they gave the comet immortality on cloth. Atlas too will have its records, not embroidered, but digital, scattered across websites, archives, and yes, even bedtime stories like this one. Its legacy isn't its body, but the ripple it leaves. Quirky aside, one day, perhaps fragments of Atlas may brush Earth invisibly. Tiny grains burning up as meteors centuries from now, little sparks of light unrecognized as Interstellar. Imagine a future child looking up during a meteor shower, making a wish, never knowing they're watching dust from Atlas. That too is legacy, quiet, anonymous, but real. You think about the broader picture. Comets are legacy machines. They carry the chemical stories of their birth stars. They deliver molecules that seed planets. They crash, they change climates. They leave isotopes in ice layers that scientists will study millennia later. Even when forgotten, their influence remains. Atlas's legacy might not be visible, but it could already be part of you, a dust grain in your bloodstream, an atom in your cells. Legacy isn't always dramatic, sometimes it's microscopic. And here's the personal side. What does Atlas mean for you? Maybe it's just a passing curiosity, a smudge in the news you'll forget by morning. Or maybe it lingers, reshaping how you see the sky. Legacy doesn't have to be universal. It can be a single shift in perspective, a reminder that you breathe in a universe larger than your worries. For some, Atlas will be trivia. For others, it will be a turning point, a spark of wonder they carry into careers, art, or simply bedtime thoughts. Another historical moment, in 1994, when Comet Shoemaker Levy 9 slammed into Jupiter. Its legacy wasn't just the science. It was the shared experience. Millions watching Hubble's images of fireballs on a planet far away. Historians still argue whether that moment shaped the modern planetary defense movement, but it definitely shaped memory. The same will be true for Atlas, even if on a smaller scale. Its legacy is not just what it was, but what it meant to those who noticed. Quirky mental image. Imagine Atlas as a guest book. Every human reaction, scientific paper, sermon, painting, panic post, a bedtime whisper is a signature. The comet leaves, but the signatures remain, proof that it passed by. The universe doesn't keep scrapbooks, but humanity does, and Atlas is already pressed between the pages. And maybe that's the truest legacy, not the comet itself, but the way it forces you to look up. For a brief moment, your species stops scrolling, stops squabbling, and shares a glance at the sky. Unity, however fragile, written in starlight. Atlas doesn't stay, but it leaves you with that habit of looking up. A habit that might outlast nations, outlast cultures, outlast even comets themselves. So as you sink deeper into your mattress, you realize legacy isn't about permanence, it's about impact. Comets don't linger, but they leave marks. And you too don't linger. You pass through once, brief and bright, leaving marks in those who notice. In that way, you and Atlas are kin, fleeting, fragile, but unforgettable in your own orbits. You exhale slowly, letting the comet slip from thought. Its legacy will live on, in equations, in poems, in myths, in dust. Your legacy will live on too, in ways you may never see. And tonight, the two stories intertwine, comet and dreamer, drifting together into silence. And now, with Atlas fading from your imagination, it's time to soften everything. You've wandered through science, myth, paranoia, poetry, and philosophy, and yet the comet keeps gliding unchanged. That's the secret gift of these stories. They remind you that the universe doesn't demand your attention, but it rewards it. Every moment you looked up tonight was a moment away from deadlines, from noise, from the small grind of days. So let your breathing slow, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Picture yourself as a speck of dust trailing behind Atlas. carried effortlessly by solar winds, weightless, unhurried. No headlines, no responsibilities, just motion through the quiet. The stars don't rush you. The comet doesn't ask anything of you. It only shows you how to drift. The room feels softer now. Shadows lengthen, sounds dull. The thought of distance stretches, and instead of frightening you, it soothes. You are small, yes, but in being small you are safe. The vastness holds you like a blanket. The comet's frozen chemistry, the philosopher's debates, the general's suspicions, the artist's brushstrokes, all of it dissolves into one thing: stillness. You don't need to carry the comet any further. It has moved on, and so can you. All that remains is calm, the hum of your own breath, the gentle pull of sleep. So rest easy. Drift. Let the comet fade into the dark while you sink into dreams. Tomorrow will bring its own headlines and worries, but tonight belongs to Zent, to wonder and to rest. Sleep well. Sweet dreams.